Welcome to Classic Trials. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel, we make sense of the law one bite at a time. In this series, we observe and analyze the play-by-play of some of the biggest trials that have shaped the public consciousness of the American judicial system. In this season, we're working our way through the case of California v. Erik and Lyle Menendez. Growing up in Princeton, New Jersey, and then Beverly Hills, California, these young men had everything they could ever want, or so it seemed, until one night on August 20th, 1989, they approached Jose and Kitty Menendez with newly purchased shotguns. Put on trial for murdering their own parents, they claimed self-defense, arguing they were terrorized in their own home by abusive parents until they could take no more. Which argument is more convincing? Come join and see for yourself. All right. Happy Monday, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. I hope it's been a good one. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. Nice and relaxing and recharging, and maybe searching for treats like Holmes right now. But otherwise, I hope it was. If it wasn't, hopefully for this next week things turn out a little bit better. We're always looking for things to improve, whether they start off well or not. Yeah, Andy is looking right at me because she wants some Treatos also. Don't worry, I'll give you some treats in a second. We're gonna get started first, and then we're gonna go with some treats. I know. I'm saying the word, and you're getting excited. I can tell. I can see it in your eyes. Anyhow, yeah. I hope you guys are having a good. Can you believe that it is the last week of September? Can you believe it? Like I feel like it just became September. We are really getting into pumpkin spice season. I had an iced pumpkin spice latte today. I was very, very happy about that. Yeah, we're right about to start putting up Halloween decorations soon. So that's gonna be also very, very fun. So anyway, I hope you guys are doing well. Okay. And oh my goodness, Mountain Princess 207, 18 days until your wedding. That's so exciting. That is such a time of stress and anxiety and excitement and all the things. So I hope that things are going smoothly for you. It's smooth enough anyway, and that things are falling into place. I know it's like at the last minute things seem to fall into place. Or there are hiccups. There are, there's always something, right? Hopefully it's limited. Hopefully it's not a big deal. And you can just kind of roll with it. But that's so exciting. So exciting. It'll be here before you know it. And oh, Mary M, you made, I think it's supposed to say pumpkin soup. That sounds wonderful also. I would very much like to be a part of that. If you would like to share in that. I'm kidding, of course. But I mean, well, genuinely though, pumpkin soup sounds absolutely delightful. And PG Patty Joe, financially, this is the last week of the third quarter, and September 30th, the last day of the government financial year. Yeah, boring. But important though. Important. End of quarter stuff is important though. So, I know that that's also sometimes a time of stress for a lot of folks as well. And and oh yeah, Cat A, hot cider. Those are delicious and taste great with pumpkin soup as well. We are definitely getting into that hot cider season. Okay. All right. So let's get going with today's testimony. We are once again still in Lyle Menendez land. He's still testifying. He's still on cross-examination, and he will be on cross-examination the entire time today. It'll be shorter than last week. But it will probably still be going for like a few hours though, nonetheless, but it definitely will be less than, I think last week we went like 5 hours or something. That was a long one. Yes, I know you want a treat. I know you do. Hey, Pupper Bear. I'll get you one in just a second. I promise you I will. Indy is feeling all of the all of the desire for all the treats, which, I mean, she is deserving of it. She did run 4 miles with me today. So, and she like ran around with bunch of like street dogs and did very well with them, as she usually does. She does very well with street dogs for some reason, less so with other dogs on a leash, especially when she's on a leash. Anyway, okay. Content. Let's get back to the trial, the actual trial. What we're all here for, right? Um Menendez. Okay, let's actually maybe pull it up on the screen. How about that? That's a good start, right? Okay, happy Monday. Here we go. Okay. All right, guys. So I've already queued it up. The first like hour was argument between the two sides, a bit about something, on his cross-examination, what they were going to get into, what they weren't going to get into. So we are just skipping through that, and we're just getting right into the testimony as we typically do. Debbie Faison Cook, thank you so much for gifting 5 Legal Bites memberships. Melissa Simok, Ardo Rissanen, Kat A, Mary M, Jackie Crow, you have all been gifted a membership by Debbie Faison Cook. So welcome or welcome back to Bite Club, and I hope that I hope you can join us on Friday for our members only live stream, our super casual one. Welcome. And Debbie, thank you so much for gifting those memberships. It's so kind, so generous of you. I love to see it. Love to see it. Sharing the wealth with more people is a wonderful thing. Okay, let's get into it, shall we?
Defendant on the witness stand.
Joseph Lyle Menendez.
All right, you're still under oath. You may continue your cross-examination.
Thank you. Mr. Menendez, do you know what city you were in the last weekend in July of 1989?
I think either New Jersey or California. But and that would probably be, Princeton or Los Angeles. I'm not really sure though.
Did your family go on a trip? I think you testified yesterday that your family, excluding you, went on a trip to Kalamazoo. Is that correct?
Right.
Did anyone go to Florida that summer before your parents were killed?
Yes.
Who went to Florida and when was it?
I had been in Florida for a short period of time, playing tennis, and I believe visiting my aunt.
Is that Aunt Marta?
Yes.
Do you remember when it was you were in Florida?
Sometime during that summer, I believe just once. I may have gone back twice.
And when you said you were playing tennis, was that in some sort of tournament or was it a camp or what was it?
No, we played in they had different tennis camps down there, and basically I wasn't in the camp, but they had, the camp was mostly for younger players, but I was playing with the professionals that would come into the town. Can't remember the names, but there were some professional players that came in. I would play with them. Guys on the pro tour, and they would play at the different camps down there.
Was your brother with you during this period of time that you've just described?
I believe he came down at some point to train for a couple days. And then, he was traveling with my parents for back and forth to different tournaments, Tennessee and Kalamazoo, like you said. And I think there was at least one other one. And at some point, I think he came down there and trained.
And when he came down there and trained, was he with your parents at that time or was he alone?
No, he just came by himself.
And how long were you there during that trip?
Not a couple days, I believe. I was supposed to be there longer, and then just didn't stay the full amount of time that I was supposed to be there and left early.
When you left early, where did you go?
I believe either New Jersey or California. Probably California.
But you're not sure.
Right.
And I think you said there could have been another trip to Florida that summer.
There might have been another trip before the tennis one, but I'm not positive. I could be mistaken.
Do you know whether or not your brother was with you on that other trip to Florida?
No.
No, you don't know. Is that correct?
No, he wasn't with me.
Oh, okay. Now, I believe you testified that you were aware of the fact that there were rifles inside of your parents' home, correct?
Yes.
And you knew that before the deaths of your parents.
Right.
Did you think that those rifles were going to play a role in your father's plan to kill you?
No. I didn't know, but I did not think that she would use rifles. I figured she would have different weapons.
Well, what different weapons? When you say she, I take it you're referring to your mother.
Yes.
Okay. And what different weapons did you think your mother would have?
Just special weapons for that purpose. That would not, I doubted she would use rifles.
Well, special weapons for the purpose of what?
For the purpose of killing us.
And what special weapons are you talking about?
Again, I did not have anything specific in mind, but I don't think I was expecting she would use rifles. I figured she would use some sort of handgun or something of that sort that didn't make noise, obviously.
You think a handgun doesn't make noise?
Well, it can be silenced in some way, I assume.
Right, but do you understand it's illegal to possess a silencer, so it's difficult to get them?
Yes, and obviously it would be illegal to kill us too, but I don't think that would be the concern.
That's fair.
If she was going to do it, I thought she would use some sort of weapon of that sort, but not the rifles.
So you thought your mother...
That's kind of a fair point, right? It would also be illegal to kill us. So, by the way, Christian Williams, thank you so much for gifting one Legal Bites membership. Thank you so much. Love Dreaming Peach, you have been gifted a membership by Christian Williams. So welcome back to Bite Club. I think you've been in it before. And Christian, thank you so much. That's very, very kind and very generous of you.
Your mother was going to arm herself with a handgun and a silencer. Is that correct?
I didn't think anything in particular. I really wasn't saying we know they're going to do it this way. Let's look around for this or that to help us find out. I just knew that.
I will say I can see people seeing his explanation or his response here and being like, I don't know about that, because if he's saying that he had a very real fear, there should be some kind of detail connected with that fear. I don't know, like his explanations are a little bit lackluster in this particular moment. So I can see someone being on the fence about this case and being like, I'm not impressed with this right now. And it's problematic, particularly because this is like so closely connected to their core argument for getting this case reduced from murder down to voluntary manslaughter, right? Because in order for this to be reduced from murder to manslaughter, the defense, not the defense has to show, but basically the jury has to be convinced that they had a sincere but unreasonable belief in that their lives were in danger, and that they were responding to that, and that that their actions were tied to that. That was the only reason why they acted the way that they did. And so I can definitely see some people having some issues with this response right here, because it definitely goes to the unreasonable part, right? You can believe that his belief was unreasonable and he still gets voluntary manslaughter, right? Because that fits within the definition. But in order for them to get those reduced charges, is they have to show that they actually had a sincere belief. So it still kind of speaks to the sincerity, though, because how much was he really feeling this if he's like, well, I kind of knew that they had a rifle, but I didn't think that they were going to use a rifle. Well, what do you mean? That actually makes a lot of sense for him to say, like, no, I believed that, yeah, she would use whatever method that she thought was was most available, or maybe would be the smartest move for her. She was a very cunning person, or maybe if his response was something along the lines of like, that was a method that was definitely available to her, but it seemed to me that my mother was much smarter than that, and that she would want to use something that wouldn't be quite as obvious as that, or quite as attention grabbing as that, or quite as, or something along those lines. The only problem with that kind of an explanation then is, well, okay, but you went and bought a shotgun, which is one of the loudest firearms that you can possibly get. So, how much were you thinking ahead? Maybe that actually helps the defense. I don't know, because then it's like, how much were they actually thinking ahead about this, right? Like, were they just desperate to get something to protect themselves because they knew that they had a certain wait time in order to get a handgun, in order to protect themselves, and so therefore they were like, well, this is better than nothing. I mean, but I haven't heard that come out of their mouths, so it's like we have to kind of project that onto them in order to get there. Maybe you can still get there, but that's something that if I were his attorney, I would have much rather had him say something along those lines himself. You can't give that testimony to the witness to give to the jury as the lawyer. That's too much coaching. But it's a very tricky line sometimes they have to walk in these kinds of situations. But I'm just sort of saying, like, what is the ideal for what could be helpful to the jury to make this decision in favor of the defense here. So you guys let me know what you think in the chat or in the comments if you're watching on replay. By the way, hey, everybody on replay, if you are on replay crew with this one, let us know in the comments. I love seeing folks that are still watching on replay after we've ended the actual live stream. Okay. Anyway, all right, let's get back to it.
That it was going to happen.
Now, I believe you indicated earlier that you thought your mother might poison you. Is that correct?
Right.
When she was in her suicidal state, correct?
Right.
Did you consider that she might poison you and your brother as a means of getting rid of you during this week in August?
It was talked about, but I didn't believe she would do that way.
Why did you think she wouldn't poison you?
I just felt just didn't think she would poison me. We were going through the possibilities and basically felt that she would do it in a more direct way, and it would just sort of happen suddenly when we didn't know about it. And then they would get rid of us and nobody would know any better. And I didn't think it would be poison or anything. I just didn't think that it would be poison. But we did talk about it. And obviously if she prepared some special meal for us, said, here, eat this, we were not going to eat it. But assuming that didn't happen, we didn't just expect that it would be poison.
You said you were talking about the possibilities. So what possibilities were you talking about?
It's a fair question.
That my dad could have hired somebody to do it, like on the boat trip. There could be people that were there for that purpose.
I mean, that's a fair answer, because as far as these guys knew when they were going on that boat trip, the guy, the captain of the boat, the people working on the boat, for all these brothers knew, they could have been hired for that specific purpose, like, and taken them to some part of the Southern California coastline, where there's no other boats around. And then they just sort of, plop them off, nearby some sharks, because sharks do exist. They do. I have seen them on the way to Catalina before. Seen plenty of dolphins too. But sharks definitely do exist in those waters. There's plenty of that stuff that could happen. So as far as they knew, I understand them at this point having some concern about that trip. Also, just because member for 13 months, thank you so much for being a YouTube member of Bike Club for over a year now. Love it. Very, very thrilled about it. And thank you so much for supporting the channel. Especially when we do content like this, that is just, it's obviously very niche. It's not the algorithms like favorite content to like push out. You've got to have a love for these kinds of cases to be watching this kind of project. So I really appreciate you guys that are supporting the channel and buying gifts or buying, gifting memberships to other people to help support the channel and stuff too. It's just, I really, really do appreciate all of you guys, because y'all are diehards that like to watch, this particular series and other content a lot like it. Okay. All right. I mean, his answer here, I would say it also kind of does make some sense, because, his parents had the capability of hiring someone. They did, have connections with some shady characters, as he said. The police did in fact start investigating those kinds of things. So it's like there definitely was enough there for these guys to at least have some sort of enough of an awareness to know something like that could have happened. Like things were crazy enough. Things were crazy enough in that household for them to believe. Even Lyle, who was the supposed, golden child, who was the one that was supposed to be like the heir to his father's, I don't know, empire, life, something along those lines. And even for him to believe that something could happen to him, because at the end of the day, the parents, the things that they did to the brothers indicates that things were just not working the way that they normally would. Okay. But yeah, so the whole thing of like, we thought that it would be something that would be less obvious. That is an answer that does make some sense.
Or he could just, which I thought was the more likely, just do it himself with my mother where nobody else knew, to minimize the risk for himself.
You were very concerned for your personal safety at this time, weren't you?
Yes.
Okay. And so you thought through the various methods your parents might use so that you could take precautions to prevent that. For instance, you said that you weren't going to eat a specially prepared meal, correct?
Right.
Did you take precautions against getting smothered in the middle of the night?
I slept with a gun in my bed.
Now, I think you indicated that that gun was loaded. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. When you loaded the gun, how many rounds did you put into it?
I loaded them Friday, and I'm not exactly sure how many rounds, but I'm sure I put in several.
Well, did you see the testimony of the gentleman from the sheriff's department, Mr. Van Horn, Deputy Van Horn, who talked about the Mossberg shotgun?
Yes.
Okay. Did that shotgun that he brought into court look similar to the ones that you and your brother purchased?
Similar.
Okay. I remember he testified that the stock was different.
Yeah, there were some things that I sort of remember that were different, but
all right,
they seemed pretty close.
The same size, right?
I believe so, yeah.
What differences do you recall about the gun you purchased versus the gun that Deputy Van Horn brought to court?
I really couldn't tell you anything specific other than it just looked different. Just didn't recognize it. It wasn't like I saw it and I said, oh, that looked sort of like the gun we had. It was just sort of similar. I mean, it was a shotgun, but I just remember thinking, it's not the same.
By the way, where are the guns now?
I assume they're either still where my brother ran down the hill, or I assume they're still there.
And after your parents were killed and you knew that you might be a suspect, did you ever go back and look for those guns?
Yes.
Were you able to find them?
No.
How many times did you go to look for the guns?
Just the one time.
On one occasion?
Right.
Did you take anyone with you?
No.
You went alone?
Yes.
Now, I believe you indicated that it was your brother who secreted the shotguns off of Mulholland while you waited and turned the car around, correct?
What does secreted mean exactly?
Hid.
Yes.
And so, were you watching where he
By
put
the
the gun?
way, that was a good witness moment. That's a witness that is paying attention and following instructions, but also not allowing himself to be just sort of rolled over because the attorney is using fancy words that he doesn't understand. He just asked, because she used the word secreted, and he asked, what is secreted. Whereas sometimes some witnesses can be so intimidated by the whole process and by the attorney that is cross-examining them, by all kinds of things. And especially someone, who is not just a witness, but also a defendant and a criminal defendant who could possibly see, capital punishment as a result of this trial. That was a good move right here for anyone that ever finds themselves as a witness, whether it's a deposition or whether it's testimony at trial or anything. If an attorney uses a word or a phrase that you don't understand, do not worry about sounding stupid. Ask about what that word means before you answer a question that uses that word. That was just a good moment. Good moment for everyone to, and regardless of whether we are talking about in law, if you find yourself in any kind of a high pressure situation and someone uses a word that you don't understand, feel free to ask. You're always going to be much better off.
The guns, or were you concerned with turning the car around?
I didn't really know where he put the gun. I just had a vague idea of where we were, and I tried to go back and find him at some point and wasn't able to do that.
When was it that you went back and looked for the guns?
Very shortly before I was arrested.
Would that have been in March? Was that during?
Yes, I think so.
And you flew out from New Jersey with some friends during that trip, didn't you?
Yes.
And who are the friends that you flew out from New Jersey with?
I flew out with Glenn Stevens, Hayden, and I believe that's it, I think.
And I take it they were not with you when you went back to look for the guns. Is that correct?
No, they were in Las Vegas.
Did you discuss with your brother where he had placed them before you went to look for them in March of 1990?
No, he was traveling in Israel.
I believe you indicated that you loaded, I think you said when you talked about loading the guns. Did you load both the guns? Did you mean to say I loaded them, or did you load one gun?
What point in the weekend are you referring to?
When the first time you ever loaded the shotguns that you and your brother purchased on the night of the 8th.
That's another good moment right there, asking for clarification. He definitely has been prepared by his team, I think, in a lot of ways, for this cross-examination. But that was a good move, I would say, by him. If she asks a question and he doesn't fully understand what she means, ask for clarification before you answer. That's another good one.
At the 18th.
Right. We loaded them at some point in the car. Maybe when we got outside. I really don't remember exactly. We loaded them before we got home, for sure. And there was some concern as to whether I had bought the right kind of ammunition that would go with that gun, so I wasn't even sure if it would work. So that's why we went to the other gun store to ask the guy.
Now, what day was it that you went to the other gun store to ask about the correctness of the ammunition?
Like the middle of the day on Saturday.
And when you loaded the gun in the car, did you take the plug out so that you could put more rounds in the gun?
I don't believe so.
Did you know that could be done?
I think either the lady or there might have been another gentleman at the store that was sort of explaining just the basic of how the gun worked, and was, I think, showing us that part of it too. But I'm not really sure that I paid much attention to it and did anything with that.
Well, when you loaded the gun, did you put 3 rounds in the gun, or did you put more in the first time you loaded it?
I really can't remember. It would be about 3. Could be more.
How did you know how to load a shotgun?
Just from what the lady had said and just experimenting.
Okay, where did you experiment?
In the car at some point.
Had Terminator come out yet? And I wish Mr. Bites was here. He knows, like, when every single movie comes out. For some reason, it's like, it's such a random thing. You ask him any movie, he remembers what year it came out. I don't, especially since like the 1980s, I would say. Um, random thing. But like, I wonder, had Terminator come out? Because if it had, I feel like that's like, yeah, Terminator was 80s. Okay. That's right. So I feel like that's, movies is like, movies are one way to like, see how it works. But also it's not the hardest, thing to figure out too, because, you've got a knob that comes out, you pull it back, the chamber opens, put the thing in. You could put it in backwards, I guess. Like that's the only thing, but like, I mean, I don't know, like you just basic explanation will do it. I don't remember it being terribly complicated. The most complicated part of using a shotgun, in my experience, is how to hold your shoulder so that it doesn't bruise your shoulder with the recoil. That is the most complicated part. And it's not really that complicated. It's just like if you don't like get the position right, you just are sore the next day. But like, okay, yeah, most won't let you put it in backwards. Okay, that's probably what admittedly has been a few years since I touched a shotgun. But yeah. So I know Terminator. Movies are one way that people learn about things, right? Whether it's correct or not, it is a reference point for a lot of people. Driving around off-roading, I will sometimes, or not sometimes, almost every single time think of Indiana Jones. That's just me, right? um, but I'm sure a lot of people are the same way, that like sometimes you're in an experience and something reminds you of a movie, or you saw something in a movie once and it kind of makes you think, okay, maybe I can do this thing. Anyway, I think was there something else here? Oh yes, of course. PG Patty Joe, thank you so much for the super sticker. That is so kind of you. Very, very kind of you. Thank you so much. And yeah, I appreciate you. And I appreciate all of you guys watching, whether you're in the chat or you're on replay and you're commenting, or you're just lurking. Either way, I appreciate all of you guys. Okay. Let's continue.
It seemed very easy.
I am feeling a little bit more energetic today, I will tell you guys, because I did literally just have a pumpkin spice latte like an hour and a half ago. So I do recognize that I think I'm a little bit I think I'm a little bit more higher energy today than I have been at this hour. Maybe I need to have more coffees like timed well before a live stream.
Just seemed to load it in the bottom, like Mr. Van Horn said.
All right,
so it wasn't complicated.
All right. And so from the demonstration that this woman gave you, and I take it that was Mrs. Geyer, who testified from the Big Five store. Is that the woman you're speaking of?
Yes, her, and there was also another gentleman that helped us initially, if I remember it correctly, before she came over for the actual purchase.
At the Big Five store?
I believe so.
Right. And this gentleman also demonstrated how to load the weapon. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, if you were in fear of both your mother and your father, did you want to have more than 3 rounds in your shotgun in case you missed?
Well, I figured 3 rounds was enough. I may have loaded more. I don't remember. I remember loading several rounds, and that's just basically all I remember.
Now, the rifles that were in the house, did you ever consider just buying ammunition for them and using the rifles in the house so that there would be no possibility of paperwork connecting you to the purchase of new weapons?
No, we never were concerned about paperwork, but we did discuss what you just said about the rifles. And I believe it was my brother's suggestion Thursday night, and I told him that I didn't think that was a good idea because I thought they would notice that they were missing. And also, he was thinking that there would be handguns there also if there were rifles, because we really didn't know what kind of weapons my parents had exactly. And I just felt they might be missing.
When was it Thursday night that you talked to your brother about weapons? I believe you indicated that you spoke to your father sometime, it would have been after 11:30 if you got home at 11 and was gone with your mother for at least a half an hour. And you spoke with your father. And when was it you spoke with your brother?
Not long after that, he came running up with my mother.
And where were you physically located when your brother came running up with your mother?
In the bedroom.
Which bedroom?
There's just one. It's my bedroom in that guest house.
And what was going on when your brother and your mother came running up?
What was going on with me?
What were they doing?
He ran up first, and he started screaming that Mom knows, and he was frantic. And I was saying, knows what? And he was saying about me and Dad. And then it was at that point that my mother, who I guess had been chasing him, because I had heard the argument, or at least the screaming, ran up the stairs, and she started screaming at my brother, and I confronted her about how she could have known all these years. And that's when she said that I knew and that nobody had ever helped her and that I knew what was going on. And I said something in denial of that, and she just said that she hated us and called us some names and ran out.
Did she threaten you at that time with death?
No.
And you had seen your mother upset on other occasions before this particular day, correct?
Yes.
And was she any more upset than on any other occasions when you'd seen her?
She was more upset through that week, but I wouldn't say she was more upset at that moment. She was just out of control, similar to other times.
Similar to times that you saw when you were 12, 13 years old, right?
Similar.
Now, I think you indicated you heard screaming you heard screaming before you actually saw your brother, is that correct?
Right.
And you were inside the guest house when you heard the screaming?
Yeah, I was somewhere in the guest house when I heard the scream.
Could you tell from which direction the screaming was coming?
Yes.
Where?
It was coming from the main house.
And the guest house is in the back of the house and is basically right on the alley, is that correct?
Right.
And I think it's a 2-story guest house?
Right.
And that your bedroom was on the 2nd floor?
Right.
And the maid's quarters in your parents' house was at the back of the main house, correct?
Right.
And so that was at the back of the house that abutted the tennis court, correct?
Right.
Okay. Now, when you went to San Diego and used Donovan Goudreau's driver's license, is it your testimony that neither you nor your brother had available any kind of California driver's license?
That's right.
And that's why you used his driver's license, is that correct?
That's right.
And you weren't concerned about tracing the documents, purchasing those shotguns back to you, is that correct?
No.
And that wasn't why you drove all the way to San Diego to purchase the guns, correct?
Right.
You just drove there because you happened to find yourself there during your discussion with your brother.
Right, after we had gone to the store in LA.
It happens. You know, just saying, as a Southern Californian, sometimes you go out for a drive, especially if you're particularly stressed out. Sometimes going for a drive down the coast, I mean, especially if I don't know which freeways they took, but like, especially if you decide to go down the PCH, the Pacific Coast Highway, also known as Highway 1, it's typically right along the water. That's a particularly relaxing drive. That's kind of like the day that Mr. Bites and I met, actually. It involved a very long drive from Newport Beach, California, down to Laguna Beach, and then all the way back up to Santa Monica. You know, like, it's just sometimes you have those kind of days when you just go for a drive. Okay, here we go. Cat A, they went down PCH. Erik says so in his testimony. So sometimes it's a big stress relief to drive down the PCH. So I wouldn't, and if they were feeling a lot of anxiety, like what it sounds like they're saying, I mean, they haven't specifically said we were so stressed out we just wanted to go for a drive. At least Lyle hasn't said that yet. Maybe he will at some point. Maybe Erik will at some point. But that's something that I can see someone doing that in Southern California very easily, having grown up in the area.
Now, Prior to your father's death, had you ever spoken to him about a man named?
And also, sorry, I'm totally interrupting again. But Erik was also telling Lyle details of his SA during the drive. That's also another reason for a drive, to just go for a drive and you know, just go where the car takes you, essentially. So that was the first time Lyle heard how bad it really was. Yeah, I can see, okay, yeah, that fits, because initially when you hear, really, like, you were in Los Angeles and you happen to just find yourself 2 hours south in San Diego, like, that sounds a little strange. But if, in the context of the other things that had been happening and the conversations that they were having in the car, like, I can see that.
Named Teddy Schneider?
The name doesn't ring a bell, so I don't know.
Did you ever talk to your father about a murder that had occurred in early August in the San Fernando Valley, where the victim had been someone involved in the video pornography business?
I'm going to object to calling for hearsay. No foundation.
I never either heard of it or discussed it with him.
Right. Now, when you went to San Diego, I believe you indicated that you gave a false address for Donovan Goodrow's driver's license. In other words, you or your brother told Miss Geyer a false address. Is that correct?
No.
You didn't give a false address?
Well, I didn't give any address. I was walking around in the store, and my brother was filling out the forms, and I don't even,
Well, did you discuss with him the fact that you should probably use an address in San Diego in order to add some realism to this transaction?
No, we figured he would use the address off the license.
Well, I believe you testified in your direct examination that you thought that you needed to have a place near San Diego, and so you made up an address. Do you remember testifying to that on direct examination?
I don't remember it that way.
Well, how do you remember it?
Did you ask him about his testimony or
No.
about what happened?
How do you remember what happened?
I just remember the long discussion about the fact that we needed an ID, and then deciding to use Donovan's license. And then the fact that Erik was going to have to be the one to present the ID and so on, and him going ahead and doing that. And it's possible that there was some discussion about where to they would ask for a local address, but I don't really remember that.
Now, do you know how August Street was chosen? In other words, did you and your brother go looking for a street in San Diego before you went to purchase the guns?
No.
Okay. Are you aware of the testimony of Detective Zoller that there is, in fact, an August Street in San Diego, just not that particular number that your brother chose?
Right. My understanding is that my brother was there. We were going to use the address off the license. For whatever reason, he could not use the address off the license. I don't know if she was holding it in the wrong way, or he didn't want to look like he was looking at the license. He just hadn't thought of it, and he was there. And I didn't know this until after we were arrested and I seen the records and people talked about it, but that he just sort of panicked and had to make up an address and just use the month. And then he just wrote in an address, and he had somehow found the zip code out. And so he just wrote it out.
Okay, so your brother just happened to pick a street that does, in fact, exist in San Diego, and also just happened to get the zip code?
No, there was something that was in front of him that had the zip code to San Diego, so that wasn't hard. So he just used the zip code. I don't know. That's sort of my understanding. I'm trying to remember what I talked about with my brother. He may have even asked her the zip code. But the street, he said he got from just picking the month, because I believe that we were supposed to just use the address off the license, and just expected him to do that. So he sort of just panicked and wrote an address. And I believe that I thought the testimony you're saying of Detective Zoller was that there wasn't even an address like that.
Now, he said there was an August Street. There just wasn't a 15 on August Street.
Right. There wasn't it was like in the 500s or something like that, he said. And my brother had just made up an address.
How was the decision made that your brother would use Donovan's license and not you?
Because it was his fake ID. He looked like him.
So it's your testimony that Donovan Goudreau's identification, his driver's license, looks like your brother?
Yes, very similar.
Now, in the application or in the records that were used, here, may I approach, please, Your Honor, with the exhibit? All right, Mr. Menendez, in addition, there's a place of birth listed up here, and it's listed as Burlingame, California. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay, was there any discussion between yourself and your brother as to choosing the place of birth?
There was no discussion that I remember between myself and my brother about anything on these forms because we were not aware that we were going to have to fill out forms at all. This is my remembrance. I just thought you had to show ID and then you buy the guns. And the forms was a surprise, is what I remember. And my brother was just sort of left standing there trying his best to fill out this form. And that's why he was kind of hoping to copy from the license.
Why didn't you help your brother? Why didn't you go up with him and help him?
Because I was just walking around and just, I didn't want to look like I was sitting there helping him. Like, here's your address. I mean, he should know that.
Were you in any way trying to avoid the appearance of two people engaging in this transaction versus one person? So that later on, if the police came down, they wouldn't remember the transaction because only one person had been involved. Did you think about that?
No, I was at the counter for some period of time, and I had talked to the gentleman before the lady came over. And I was there buying ammunition, and we were clearly together, walked in the store together, left together. And there wasn't any concern for that at all.
Did you make any attempt to alter your appearance, such as wearing sunglasses or taking off your wig?
No.
Mr. Menendez, you and Donovan were very close, weren't you?
Yes.
And you knew a lot of things about Donovan Goudreau, right?
What he told me.
All right. Did you know where he'd been born?
No, I knew where he was from.
And where was he from?
Northern California, like San Francisco area.
Now, when you purchased the shotguns, did you think about the fact that if you used the shotguns, they would make a lot of noise?
Sure.
And what did you discuss with your brother in regards to that fact?
Nothing, actually.
Well, you had considered that if your mother was going to kill you, she was going to use a silencer, correct?
Right.
And I take it you thought your mother had some sort of connections where she could illegally purchase a silencer. Is that correct?
Sure.
Your mother had some sort of underground connections where she could buy illegal weapons. Was that your state of mind?
Well, I don't know anything about illegal weapons, but I figured whether she could get them or my dad could get them would not be something difficult at all for them.
During the period of time that you were in fear for your life, did you ever conduct a search of your family's home to see if there were other weapons there aside from the rifles that you had already known about?
No.
Why not?
It just didn't cross my mind to search through the house to look for weapons, and I wouldn't want to have been caught doing that.
Did you ever go in the kitchen and look at the kitchen knives and see if you thought any of them might be the weapon that would be used to murder you?
No, this was a very serious situation. This wasn't like when my mom chased me around with a knife in Pennington. This had nothing to do with knives. This was about us wanting to survive and whether they were going to kill us and when. So the knife thing is...
Whoa. I mean, that's a lot to unpack right there, that answer. So from his experience, his mother running around the house chasing him with a knife is not a serious situation. That's what he just said. This was a serious situation. This is not just when she would chase us around the house with a knife. But you know, this was a more serious situation than that. I mean, most people would look at that and be like, wait a minute, like that's a crazy situation. That is a crazy situation for anyone to take a sharp object and chase anyone, anywhere. That is terrifying. And he's just like, oh, that was just a Tuesday. So wild. But you know, I think that, you know, I kind of understand what the prosecution is trying to do here. She's trying, you know, Pam Bozanich, she's trying to go through all of the other things that they have in the house and that they probably have had for a long time that the parents could have used that were just dangerous objects, right? Dangerous objects, dangerous weapons, these kinds of things. And just, you know, go through and be like, well, were you worried they would use this? Were you worried they would use that? Were you worried they would use this? Were you worried they would use that? And he's just kind of going through, no. And, you know, some of these answers are a little bit lackluster in my opinion, but when you tie it to him saying they wouldn't have wanted it to be so messy that they would have their fingerprints on them, you know, like they wouldn't have wanted their fingerprints on the act, right? It kind of makes sense that he's just saying they wouldn't have used that because that's just too obvious. They wouldn't have used a knife. That's just too obvious. They wouldn't have used the rifles that they had in the house because that's too obvious. Like we really thought that they were going to hire someone else or maybe, you know, find someone that had access to a silencer and you know and give them that or something along those lines. You know, so anyway, that kind of makes sense, but you know, I will say some of these other answers are a little bit lackluster, but when you reframe it in the context of, you know, they wouldn't have wanted to get their own hands dirty, then it kind of makes sense.
Well, a knife doesn't make any noise, does it, Mr. Menendez?
No, but I assume that if they're going to kill us, they were going to make sure that they killed us.
And that they made noise?
No, I assumed it would be in a way that didn't make noise.
Now, you are telling us here today that you were extremely concerned during this period of time, from Thursday night till Sunday night, with your personal safety.
More than extremely concerned. We were pretty desperate about it and losing sleep, you know, not sleeping because we were staying up, not wanting to be attacked asleep. And
that's also something that can impact their sincerity of their belief, but also, you know, it could impact the reasonableness of their belief, right? But again, it doesn't have to be reasonable. It only has to be sincere. The belief that they thought that they were going to be attacked. So, you know, that also, if you think about it, if you're not getting sleep for several nights, I mean, how many of you guys watching are parents and have lived through sleepless nights with very young children? I have not myself, but I have seen it. I have seen it up close with family members and friends and whatnot. But you know, I know exhaustion too, right? When you are running yourself ragged because for one reason or another. But anyway, so lack of sleep can impact your choices. It can impact your perception. It can impact all kinds of things. And you can make some big mistakes when you are not getting enough sleep. All right.
very fearful.
And you genuinely believed that your life was about to be ended. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you went to the police and you told them.
No.
Why couldn't you go to the police?
We had talked about Thursday night what we could do. And we talked about running away. And we talked about the police, telling relatives. We talked about the different possibilities of running away, and my brother basically asking me, you know, where could we go, and that they wouldn't find us, and no good answers. And, based on the fact of who my mother was and my father's power. And, I'd known all the things she had done to track down his girlfriend, Louise, and look through credit card receipts and photos. And there was an instance when I was in California and met some guy at a tournament out here who came up to me and wanted to coach me. He was from New Jersey. I mentioned it to my mom, and she called every club in New Jersey and tracked the guy down and found him. And just because I said that it was a guy that had contacted me. So, she seemed to have these abilities, and we knew that, especially with the tracking down of Louise. So, we discussed pretty thoroughly running away and how we could do it and, going to other countries and so on. And basically felt completely that they would find us and they could find us wherever we went. And it was best to stay in the house. And we talked about the police too.
All the option you've discussed would have
Courtney, I think
required
that's
you to
correct.
give up the lifestyle that you had been leading, correct?
Sure.
And you didn't want to do that, did you?
Well, at that point, we were concerned about surviving. But before Thursday, I didn't want to do that.
But after Thursday, when you were in genuine fear of your life, all the other options you could think of, aside from resorting to violence, would have required you to leave home and be on your own,
Right.
with no more support from your father.
Right.
And you still didn't want to do that, did you?
Well, not for that reason. If I felt I could have left home and had peace of mind somewhere and I wasn't going to be killed, I would have done that immediately. And we just didn't feel that we could do that.
Well, if you got to the police and you told them everything you've told the jury now, and your father had then killed you, it would have looked awfully suspicious that your father had killed you. In other words, you could have used publicity or you could have used revelation of the facts to protect your life, correct?
Right, and we discussed that, and we had two problems with that. One is the fact that my dad was a very powerful, influential, well-known person in a small area, Beverly Hills, and would the police side with us on that, and would they believe us? Obviously, my parents denying that we were anything but the ideal family. And the main problem was, even if we had done that, what could we do? What could we do with the police? Try to file charges or something? I just felt that if I had taken it to that step, we would definitely have put ourselves in a position to be killed, without a doubt. And I don't have any doubts that my father and mother would have killed us before we would ever get to a trial point or anything like that. And I really wasn't thinking that he could go to jail for what was happening, and therefore I would be safe. I just felt if I went to the police and I said, this is what's happening, that they couldn't protect us, and that my dad would prefer to murder us, regardless of how suspicious it was, in some way, before he let himself be ruined and his reputation be ruined to that incredible degree. I don't, you have to understand what my brother was telling me on Friday and how sick these things were. And the idea of my mother having known this and my dad having done this, I felt that he would rather kill us and deal with whatever that held.
I can understand this, because if you understand, like, gangs, for example, someone going to prison, for gang behavior, gang activity, or what have you, sometimes, they still have the ability to control the people that have been under their umbrella, under their supervision, you could say, even from prison, because you have people that will just, that will enact certain acts on your behalf if you are powerful enough. So I can understand that for him, he's like, so they put him away in jail. Then what? He can still have the people do the things to us. Like it's not like we're not safe until, it's almost like the conclusion that you kind of have to reach is like these guys kind of felt they weren't safe so long as their parents were living at that point, just because of how things had ended up. But I don't think he's going to actually say that explicitly, because if he says that they realized that, then that sort of teeters back towards murder away from voluntary manslaughter. Perhaps. I don't know. Well, no, that's still voluntary manslaughter, possibly. Um, but yeah, I can see that. I can see that happening.
So you didn't think that your story or that your version of what had happened in your family could protect you. Is that what you're saying? No matter who you told it to?
That's right.
And even if you told it to police, you don't think you would have been believed. Is that correct?
Well, that's not that they would not have believed us. I didn't know. But it's just that I don't know if they could have done anything about it to the point of protecting us. Because unless you knew who my father was, and I knew him very well, and you've experienced the things that I've tried to talk about here, it's very difficult to understand how dangerous he and my mother are. I don't think, I don't know anything about other people that do this to their kids, but I just wasn't convinced that they could protect us or would really understand and believe how serious a threat it was. So we had no confidence at all in the police ability to help us.
You also had all your relatives who've come here and testified in front of these juries about the horrors of your family. Those relatives were available to you in 1989.
Right. And the only one that I saw that stood up to my dad that I got to see was my Aunt Terry, and she seemed to be ciphering everything that happened in my life to my mother. And, another thing that was going on is that they seemed to know everything that was happening in my life and in my brother's. They would find things out that nobody really knew. And my mother would mention it, or I would be yelled at for it, or they would want me to explain it. And I could not figure out at that time how they were finding out all this information. And I just felt, it seemed like an incredible power on their part to be able to do all this. And I found out later that it was because the phones were tapped, but I didn't know that at the time. And as far as my relatives, my two strongest relatives are my aunts. And, my Aunt Marta, like she said, sort of idolized my father business-wise and did not, they might have had an idea of that bad things were going on, but not these things. And whether they would have been able to protect us in the house and so on. And I didn't believe it was even a possibility.
But you didn't have to stay in the house, Mr. Menendez.
Right, but it wasn't about where I was or how I was living at that point. It was about living and surviving and not having to just, wake up in the night with a gun at your head wherever we were. So that was what our concern was. That's why we decided to stay in the house and just get protection instead.
During this period of time between Thursday night and Sunday night, did you play any tennis in the backyard of your parents' home?
Thursday night and Sunday
Between
night?
Thursday night and Sunday night, did you and your brother play any tennis on your family's tennis court?
No, definitely not.
And you specifically note here today that you did not play any tennis. You yourself did not play tennis during that period of time.
Right, we played tennis all the time back there, like the weekend before, but once this thing happened on Thursday, aside from maybe my brother playing Thursday morning, I don't believe we played any tennis.
I think you said it was Friday morning your brother played tennis.
No, I said that I believe that it was Thursday morning that he played tennis with Mark Heffernan.
Right, but you also indicated that you got up on Friday morning, you found your brother playing tennis.
Well, he wasn't playing tennis. He was practicing his serve. He wasn't playing with somebody.
All right, but he was on the tennis court with the tennis racket and tennis balls.
Right.
And it's your testimony that you did not play any kind of tennis, either by yourself or with anyone else during this time period. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. Now, on Sunday, August the 20th, what time was it that you woke up?
Well, yeah, I guess around pretty early in the morning, I can't really place a time, but I would say somewhere between 7 and 9 o'clock. My brother woke me up to tell me what had happened Saturday night.
What did your brother tell you?
that Dad had tried to get in his room and that he had been sitting on the bed and thought that he might have to kill him if he came in the room. He was worried about where my mother was and that it was just this frantic situation, and he thought Dad was going to try and get him that night.
Did he tell you about what time this incident had occurred on Saturday? This was after you got home from the fishing trip?
Right.
Did he tell you what time this had occurred?
Very late. Right soon after I went to bed. I assume he didn't say what time, but it would have to be after I left, went to UCLA, came back, then went back outside after we had the fight with my mother. Then we talked, and then I went to my guest house. And so I guess it was right after that.
And at the time that you went back to the guest house and you left your little brother inside of the main house with your parents, you were still in mortal fear for your life. Is that correct?
Definitely at that point, after what my mother said, yes.
And you were so afraid that you went inside of the guest house and you went to sleep, correct?
No, I stayed up for many hours, but I knew that I couldn't just be awake for weeks and weeks straight. I didn't know how long this was going to go on, and so I just tried to sleep at some point after I had stayed up long enough.
Now, I believe you indicated then between 7 and 9, your brother came to you and recounted to you an absolutely terrifying incident that had occurred the night before, which furthered your belief that you were going to die, correct? In other words, when your brother told you what your father had done, did that add to your belief that you were going to die?
Certainly, yes.
Okay. And your brother didn't come to you right after it happened, but rather waited until between 7 and 9. Is that correct?
Yes, because he was afraid to come out of the room. The door was locked. My dad was demanding him to open the door. He thought Dad was going to break it down and he was going to have to shoot him. He was sitting there I believe he said he was sitting there on the bed with his gun and describing to me the situation. So he didn't come out. I guess at some point felt he could sort of venture out in the morning and got over to me.
Did you have a phone in the guest house?
Yes.
Was that your own phone line?
No. In the guest house?
Yes.
There were 3 lines, so I think I had all 3.
In the guest house?
Yeah.
Did your brother have his own phone line?
He had his own phone line.
And where was the phone located for your brother's phone line?
Well, they were located throughout the house. They rang in my parents' bedroom, they rang in the downstairs, and they rang. Well, it wouldn't have rung in my house. I think I just had my line and the main line, but I might even have had Erik's line.
All right. And did Erik have a telephone inside of his bedroom?
Sure, he could call me, and the phone would ring in my parents' bedroom, and he certainly wasn't going to do that. So,
Did your phone ring in your parents' bedroom?
yeah, the way my mom structured it is that all the lines rang everywhere in the house. That's why she was able to tap into Erik's line from her bedroom.
And so there was no way your brother could get a phone call to you while this terrifying incident was going on. Is that correct?
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it.
If he had felt that he could call, I'm sure he would have.
But you got no phone calls. Is that correct?
That's right.
And when he told you about this thing that had occurred, did you get an impression of how long before it had occurred? In other words, how many hours before he was telling you about it had this incident occurred?
I got the impression it was many hours before.
Okay. Now, you went to you went shark fishing and you got home around what, midnight?
Somewhere around midnight, I think.
And then you and your brother went to UCLA to further discuss the situation.
Right.
And that was from what time to what time?
After that, when we got home, we left pretty much right away, and whatever time we got there, and we spent a half hour or more, I'm not sure, maybe even longer, just hanging out and also talking.
So you drove over to UCLA and you went to what, an athletic field or something and walked
Right.
around?
Yes.
So how long were you gone? What time did you return home?
I'm not good with the times because I wasn't wearing a watch or anything, but I would think it would be very late.
What's very late?
$2:30, something like that, I think, and maybe 2:00, something like that.
Now you stayed up for a long period of time after that. Is that correct?
I stayed up usually till about 4:00.
Now you said usually you stayed up till 4 a.m.?
Well, since Thursday, yes.
All right, so you were awake at least until 4 a.m., is that correct?
I can't say that's specifically what happened that night, and that's for sure the time, because I just would stay up for a couple hours, partly because it was difficult to sleep under the situation, but I was also feeling so exhausted that it was hard to sleep, but mostly because I wanted to stay up for a period of time, because I figured that we probably would be killed at night when we were sleeping. And it just felt like it would probably be some time after they felt I had fallen asleep. So I waited.
Mr. Menendez, you've
Sounds
had
so stressful.
4 years to think about the events that occurred between the 17th and the 20th of August. You've had 4 years to think about that. Are you telling me you can't recall what time you went to bed the morning that you killed your parents?
No, I can't recall.
Did you think it might be important?
Whether it's important or not, I can't recall.
Right, so then it's your testimony that you went to bed and that between 7 and 9 in the morning, your brother came and told you about this very explosive incident which had occurred the night before.
Right.
Did you ever hear any pounding or screaming coming from the main house before you went to sleep?
No.
Were you ever awakened by any such noises?
No.
So after you got up between 7 and 9 on the morning of the 20th, what did you next do?
The 20th? Nothing. I just stayed.
Yeah, the question about the noise doesn't. I mean, I get why she's got to, I guess, leave no stone unturned, so to speak, right? So she's, asking about that, but he's in a guest house. He's in it's a different building, right? So if Jose is like upstairs in the main house, if he was in the same hallway, next door, I could understand. Yes, you would hear that, but it's just, I don't know.
Stayed in the guest house and waited, and eventually my brother showed up again.
And did your brother tell you where he had been?
Well, we had discussed the night before that he would be out and then check in. And so when he woke me up in the morning, he just said he was going to be out driving around. So he didn't tell me where he had been, or at least I don't remember if he did.
Did you and your brother discuss the fact that it might look suspicious if he was gone from the house for long periods of time, if in fact you were trying to keep your parents from being suspicious?
No, we didn't, not during the day necessarily.
You and your brother had many discussions about how you were going to save your life during this period of time, correct?
Right.
And in fact, when you went to UCLA after you went on this fishing trip, that's what you were talking about, wasn't it?
Yes.
And what did you talk about at UCLA?
Well, we were mostly talking about the fact that nothing had happened on the fishing trip, and that I felt that this was relieving. My brother felt that it meant nothing, that they were still going to kill us, and it was just sort of this terrifying thing about the fact that you would think it was going to happen, and then nothing would happen, and then they would say something, or something would happen that would make you think it was going to happen again at some point. And then it was sort of up and down. So we were talking about that, just that we couldn't believe things had gotten to this point, and that we would, I believe in that conversation, stay apart the next day and just keep trying to go day by day.
During the last 3.5 years that you've been in custody, have you ever been housed next to your brother?
I was, yes, I have been.
And you've had ample time to speak to your brother during the last 3.5 years that you've been in custody, haven't you?
Yes, usually with other people around, but yes.
So your brother was gone, and at some point he checked back in with you. At what time was it that he checked back in with you, approximately?
12, maybe 11.
And where were you physically located when your brother checked back in with you?
I believe in the guest house. I was up, but had not decided to go into the main house yet, so I was somewhere in the house, either upstairs or downstairs.
And keep in mind too that your memory can be super foggy if you are exhausted, if you have not been getting much sleep. So it's like not only are your perceptions impacted, but your memory is later impacted. There's so much that can be, impacted by this fog of lack of sleep. Yikes.
Now, had you already called Perry Berman by the time your brother checked in with you?
I had called Barry Berman at that point, yeah.
And from where did you call Perry Berman?
From one of the phones in my guest house.
Right. And what was the purpose of calling Perry Berman?
To set up something that evening and go out with him and be with somebody, which was also part of the things that we discussed the night before, that it would be safer to be with people and have plans.
Well, the night before you'd been with people, but you didn't feel comfortable. The night before you'd been with the crew from the fishing ship.
Right.
And you didn't feel comfortable.
That's right.
But you were going to feel comfortable with Perry because you didn't think Perry was going to kill you, correct?
No, Perry wasn't going to kill me.
And part of calling Perry was part of a plan that you and your brother had, correct?
No, it was just something we had discussed that we would have to, as best we could, try to be apart during the day, and at night sleep apart and not do anything that might get my dad or mom nervous, and then have plans at night so that we'd be safer at night until the time when we would have to come back to the house.
You often slept inside the main house, though, didn't you?
Almost never.
Didn't you tell the police when you gave them your interview in September of 1989 that you often slept inside of the main house if the guest house bathroom wasn't working?
Right.
Okay, so why didn't you just tell your parents that the guest house bathroom wasn't working and go inside the house to be with your brother who was in mortal danger?
I just didn't do that. I thought that would be the kind of behavior that would be suspicious. It didn't even occur to me, but I doubt I would have, even if it had.
Well, you've indicated that you felt that you were smart enough to do the work at Princeton University, correct?
Right.
Okay. All you would have had to do is do something to the toilet, go inside, take something out of the toilet, go inside the house and say, hey, the toilet's not working, I'm going to stay here. Because you were in fear of your life, right?
I mean, we could have done a lot of the things that you're suggesting. I'm just telling you what we did.
Right.
And that didn't occur to me. Or it would have been a good idea, probably.
And what you did was you killed your parents and then began to spend their money, right?
Well, that's something that happened, but I don't think characterizing that way is putting it in the right context.
Well, why did you need to buy a Rolex watch 4 days after your parents were killed?
I didn't need to.
You wanted to.
Well, what happened that day is that my uncles had talked to my brother and I, and that I think it was mainly my brother needed to get suits for the memorial service in LA that was coming up, and also for the one that they were planning in New Jersey. And we were sort of cooped up in the hotel and told us to go out and do that, and we did. And we went to Bullock's at one of the shopping centers, and we went ahead and got the suits and so on and purchased that. And we were wandering around, and I was sort of down and kind of depressed and just wandering around into stores. And we were in the jewelry store, and I don't know why, but I just purchased the Rolexes. And at some point in the purchase, I started to feel awkward about it, probably for the reasons that, you're feeling awkward about it right now. And I called my uncle and asked him about it. And he said, don't worry about it. Just go ahead and do it. So I think it was my uncle, but it was some relative.
For the reasons that I'm feeling awkward about it right now?
Well, I realize that, I look back and I think that it sounds awful, and I wish that I hadn't bought them. And it is a bad thing, but it wasn't for any specific reason. It was just something I was wandering in the store and I was feeling down, and I bought them.
So you just thought a $9,000, 18 karat gold Rolex would go nicely with your funeral suit. Is that right?
No, I didn't. I really didn't think much about money in my life, and I just sort of bought things spur of the moment all the time, and this was just another thing.
May we approach, please, Your Honor?
I mean, I can see that. I can see that happening. You know, people are going to feel a certain way about the Rolex watches, right? Based on, you know, what really hits with them. But I can see that somebody who grew up with a lot of money and who didn't ever have to work for it doesn't understand the value of that money. You know, like how many teenagers or young adults, you know, that grew up in relatively comfortable circumstances took until, let's say, after college, when they were actually working a 9 to 5, to actually understand, oh, I have to pay for rent first. I have to pay for groceries. You know, like there's all this stuff that, like, student loans are no longer paying my bills for rent and for groceries and all this other stuff. All of that comes from the work that I do at my job. Okay, now I'm going to be a little bit more miserly about this stuff. You know, I can understand at this point, he had never had any kind of a job. I guess it seems like he probably even now at this point has never had, you know, any kind of a real job to speak of, because they were in prison, you know, from this point on. But, you know, I can understand someone never having gone through that adjustment into adulthood, to actually understand the value of money and to be like, yeah, I'll buy this fancy luxury thing, because that's oftentimes what teens and young adults do before they go through you know, the you know, that transition. Just because, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. Wait, so they planned to be caught originally, but they also wanted to plan an alibi the day before. Yeah, I mean, from what it sounds like, they you know, I mean, it sounds like they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know what they wanted to do. They were kind of all over the place with a lot of their decision making. I mean, including the movie theaters and going here, going there, you know, trying to find one of their friends to you know, be seen with a friend, all this kind of stuff. It's I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of their decision making that just doesn't really make much sense, which, if you take a step back and think about it, it kind of trends towards not being premeditated, right? Like that's one of the big questions here is this premeditated or is it not? Also, okay, this is fair. Don't forget he got to tag along with Jamie across Europe by restringing rackets. True. So it's like he had taken on some sort of jobs before, but never one. What I meant was, you know, it's different than taking some sort of a seasonal job or some sort of a gig, right? When you're working in college, that's different than when you're outside of school and fully self-reliant and you have regular bills that you have to pay. You know, it's different, but that's, you know, that's an interesting point as well. Oh, and this is a fair point too, Shireen. I've been shopping when I've been sad before, and you don't really think about things. That's true. That's also true. Uh, you know, sometimes emotionally, you you don't necessarily look at what you're buying or think too much about it. You're just kind of, it's entirely possible to be in a haze while shopping. Okay. All right. Let's continue on here.
Mr. Menendez, at the same time that you purchased the Rolex watches, you also purchased the money clips. Do you remember the testimony from Miss Mahar that you purchased money clips?
Yes, I remember the testimony.
Okay, did you in fact purchase money clips?
She says we did. We did. I don't actually remember it, but I'm sure we did.
And do you remember that during that transaction you spent approximately $15,000? Correct?
That's a lot of money.
Okay, now who were the watches going to be for?
Myself and my brother.
And who was going to have the 18-karat gold Rolex?
Myself.
And what about the other 2 Rolexes?
One of them was for my brother, and one of them was just basically I was going to wear that one also. I'm not even sure why I bought that one.
So also, Cat A, this is a really good point too. Retail therapy is also a thing. Why do we conveniently forget about that when it comes to Lyle and Erik? 100% true. Some people self-soothe with food or with alcohol or with drugs. Some people do it with stuff. Buying stuff, collecting stuff, there are a lot of ways that we self-soothe in stressful situations. And from what it sounded like, from what he said previously in his testimony, he said that it has been stressful nonstop since they killed their parents. It didn't end the stress when their parents died. It just kind of continued on, and it transformed into a different sort of chapter, you could say. So I mean, yeah, retail therapy, absolutely something that is totally possible too. Indy snoozing. Let me 1 second. Let's take a little quick Indy break. Oh, it's so cute. Hey, puppy. She's such a cute pupper. Okay, all right. That's enough of that. Let's get back to it. Oh yeah, and also if he has ADHD, impulsive buying is a common thing. Yes, it is. Unfortunately, it very much is. Okay, all right, let's continue.
So you had one for you, one for your brother, and a spare. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. And the money clips that you purchased were for the money that you were going to be having. Is that it?
I really don't remember buying money clips, but I'm sure it was just to hold whatever it is that maybe I had. It's obviously to hold money and credit cards and so on, since I normally didn't carry a wallet. I normally didn't have to carry much with me, but
Shortly after this, you returned to Princeton for the memorial service. Is that correct?
yes.
And sometime after you were in Princeton, you bought a car, didn't you?
Right.
What kind of car did you buy?
I bought a Porsche 911 or Carrera.
All right. And how much money did you spend buying the Porsche?
I don't remember exactly, but it was very expensive.
You have a moment, please. Rhonda.
Yes.
Mr. Menendez, I'm showing you Exhibit 55, which has been marked. It appears to be a package of documents relating to the purchase of a Porsche. The first page looks to be a copy of a driver's license from New Jersey, but the picture is obliterated. Does that appear, though, to be your signature on the driver's license on the first page of this exhibit?
Yes,
And that's a New Jersey license, correct?
that's right.
And the documents seem to reflect that this transaction began on September the 6th of 1989. Is that correct?
Overruled.
Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't see.
The date appears to be September the 6th of 89, where this is on page 3 of the package. It's a sales pre-delivery inspection worksheet. And it's got your signature here at the bottom. Isn't that correct?
Right, I don't think I filled that out, but that's my signature.
Okay, so you did fill out your signature, correct?
Right.
And the ultimate purchase price of this vehicle was, it looks like it was approximately $70,484. Is that correct?
I can't see the numbers too well. That's the original price, and there's some more numbers somewhere around there.
And in addition to buying this car, you had it customized. You had some special things that you wanted on the car, right?
Just the something to do with the radio, I believe.
Now, September was the 6th. Was that the same day that you got your first payment from the life insurance policy that your Aunt Marta had told you about after the death of your parents? Was that the first payment? Well, how were you going to pay for the car then?
Well, at the time I bought the car, those payments had already arrived. I don't know what day they arrived, but.
So that at the time that you bought the car, you already knew that you had insurance money from your parents' death to pay for the Porsche. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. And you didn't get the bottom of the line Porsche, did you?
No.
Hadn't you always wanted a Porsche?
No, I had never even thought about a Porsche. And I just usually drove my parents' cars, or my dad bought the Alpha for me, and we just drove whatever they had. And I was in New Jersey, and I was going to buy a new car. So I bought this one, which was on the floor in the building.
So was this another one of those purchases that you just happened to be there and so you just bought it kind of like the Rolex? Or did some more thought go into purchasing this car?
No, I was with the bodyguards who were sort of like the friends. At least one of them was I felt close to. And, asking their advice, and we drove the car, and so I bought that one.
And this is, I mean, what she's getting at, of course, is rich kids killing their parents for the money. Look at them spending all that money. And they don't put much thought into it, but they're really happy to spend their parents' money as soon as the folks are gone. And I get it. It certainly is something that not most people can relate to. They are living the 1%er life, right? The top 1%. And it's hard for a lot of people to digest this kind of spending behavior, especially on this level, right? Like, we can talk about how, retail therapy is very common. People will go shopping, people will, just go out and buy stuff to sort of self-soothe. But when you are at this level, it does get harder to relate to. And this case, I think one of the things that I think that the defense probably could have done better is, especially after having watched Deputy Heard, I think one of the things that they did very well in Deputy Heard that maybe in this case, which is, it's not the same lawyers, not the same time period even, but one of the things that they could have done better in the defense in this case is making the unrelatable relatable, right? Like, that was something seemingly impossible going into Deputy Heard, was like, how do you make someone like Johnny Depp relatable to the average person, to the average juror? That was definitely an uphill battle for him, but also for Amber Heard. But they did such a phenomenal job of describing how crazy his life was, and how he recognized how crazy his life was, and how it's just not normal, and he's just sort of has to live the life that he has been given. And it was very well done. I think here what they could have done better was to show, I guess, a little bit more how money was treated in the family, how things were just sort of purchased all the time, and how expensively things were purchased all the time, and how, they've done it a little bit. He talked about how money was just sort of lying around the house. Like, he could just take cash and buy his girlfriend a fur coat, which is very expensive. So they've done that a little bit, but it seems that one of the things that the defense really could have done a little bit better here maybe was like really hammering in just how strange their life was before all of this happened. Not just with the SA, not just with the abuse, but also with the money piece, to show how fabulously wealthy they were, to show just how much money their father was making, and how he would use the money that he was making to get what he wanted in life. Those are the kinds of things that maybe could have really helped them in this case much better. So anyway.
Now, on Sunday, August the 20th, oh, by the way, I wanted to ask you one more thing. You said that you went out to buy the Rolex because you were cooped up in the hotel. Is that correct? You were cooped up in the hotel?
Right.
Okay, you were.
Okay, and sorry, one point here, because this is an interesting point. Courtney Place said, I don't think living a rich life is really that unrelatable. I'm not rich, but I'm not struggling to understand how money works with a rich life. That may be true, but there are people who, as soon as someone is in a position like this and they have a lot of money, the fact that they have a lot of money will be enough for some people to get their pitchforks out. Like this was something that was picked up around this time, I think, by the media, was like, these are spoiled rich kids. And it's kind of a narrative that continues today for a lot of people. These are spoiled rich kids. Spoiled rich kids, spoiled rich kids, spoiled rich kids. And so and it's used not to understand the life that they were living and the decisions that they were making. But yes, hello, I know you're hungry, but Mr. Bites will be home soon and he will give you food. I know you're hungry. I'm sorry to keep you waiting. But so there are some people that is enough to sort of put them in the distasteful zone already. And it's sort of like a lizard brain kind of triggering sort of thing. So not everyone thinks along those terms, like you do, with a bit more empathy. Love your mean Peaches a question. If you have wealthy prejudice, shouldn't they have been booted off the jury for bias? Yeah, I don't know what kind of questions they went through with this jury to seat the jury. If I'm defense, I absolutely would have wanted that to be something that we explore with the jurors or potential jurors before we seat the jury. I don't know if they actually did that, but I definitely would have wanted to. Yeah. No. Yeah. That, I guess that answers that. Okay. Let's get back to it.
We're cooped up in the Hotel Bel Air, correct?
Right. That's not why we went to buy the Rolex, but we were.
Okay. And could you describe the accommodations that you had at the Hotel Bel Air while you were grieving for your parents?
We got the room that Henry had arranged, and that's where our family met, and that's where I stayed, and my brother stayed.
Okay. Was this a one bedroom room, or was it 2 bedrooms, or was it, how big was it?
I don't remember. It was big enough that everybody could sort of meet there, and they would all order food, and we would meet there, and so it was pretty big.
Was it a suite?
Yes.
So you had not only a bedroom but a living room. Is that correct?
Right.
And did you have a hot tub? Jacuzzi?
If we did, we never used it. I don't believe so. There was some kind of a garden thing out back.
Now, on August the 20th, when you called Terry Berman, I believe you've indicated that it was your intent to get out of the house as part of your plan to try to save your life. Is that correct?
On August the what?
August the 20th, the day that your parents died.
Right.
Okay, and it was part of your plan that you wanted to get out of the house in order to avoid being killed by your parents, correct?
Right. As soon as my brother got back, we had the short discussion, and I told him we got to get out of the house.
And when you say your brother got back at around noon, correct?
All right, as I indicated, we'd have to take a break at
Oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor.
All right, we'll take a recess, ladies and gentlemen, and I have a meeting to attend, so we'll resume at 1:45. Don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it, and we'll resume at 1:45. Is there something the council wanted to discuss?
Okay. We are going to fast forward.
All right.
Secondly, we need to talk about the box of letters. letters. And thirdly, I've cited to counsel and now I will report.
I didn't hear about the box letters. What was it?
We still need to discuss the box
Yeah.
letters.
Okay. They will
Them
discuss
all
the box
jurors are back, and welcome again. And we'll now resume with the examination of the witness, further cross-examination.
Mr. Menendez, before the lunch break, I was asking you a question about how it was that you and your brother came up with the address for the gun purchase of August Street. And I believe you indicated that your brother wrote down the month of August because he wrote down August because it was the month of August when you purchased the guns. Is that correct?
Right.
On Friday, you were questioned by your attorney in regards to your purchase of the shotguns at the Big Five. And you gave the following testimony. This is volume 88, page 14,592, starting at line 21. In response to a question by your attorney about did anyone in the store show you how the guns worked, part of your answer was as follows. I was mostly wandering around the store, allowing Erik to complete the purchase. It was a long thing. She had a form with different stuff, and we had found out of a phone book. We felt that maybe we should have a local address, since Donovan's address was San Francisco or something up north. We didn't know if there were going to be further restrictions, like if you had to be in that city. We just didn't know the rules. We kept finding out as we went along. Okay, that was the
Right.
testimony that you gave on Friday as to where you got this address.
Right.
Okay, and today you testified that the address came from the fact that it was the month of August.
Right.
Where did you get the address?
He did it because it was the month of August, because I found out after he had filled out the forms and we had left the store that he had blanked on the address that he had looked up in the phone book, because he said he was concerned that they might ask for a local address when he bought the guns and he was handling the ID. And so he blanked out and he just wrote the month of August.
Oh, so you had discussed previously the idea of getting a local address. Is that correct?
No, we didn't discuss it, but he was concerned about it and at some point looked in the phone book. And so I found that out afterwards because he was telling me he had blanked out and he had just wrote this thing, August, and he was telling me what happened. Because we weren't expecting a form. And so when the lady brought out the form for him to do all the signing and everything, I just assumed he was going to use the address that was on the license.
Well, if you
And
were,
afterwards, he told me he had not. He had just said August.
now when was it that you looked in the phone book?
I didn't really look in the phone book, but he looked in the phone book probably when we were at the restaurant. But he remembers that a little better. He says we're at the Bob's Big Boy.
Now, if you weren't expecting that there'd be a form to fill out, why did you need to find an address in the city?
I didn't think that we did, but he said that he was concerned that they might ask him for a local address, and so he would have to give one. So he looked one up.
Now, where is Mr. Goudreau's driver's license presently? Do you know?
I really don't know.
After the purchase of the shotguns, do you know what happened to the driver's license? Was it destroyed?
No, I don't know where it is. Somewhere.
I believe right before we broke for lunch, I was asking you a question about the events of August the 20th, and you said that your brother had returned home around noon. Is that correct?
Right.
And prior to your brother returning home, you had already spoken or you'd already called Perry Berman's. Is that correct?
That's right.
And at that time, you didn't make contact with Mr. Berman, did you?
No, I left a message.
On his answer machine.
Right.
And then I believe you've indicated in your direct examination that you later found out from your father that Perry Berman had returned the message that you'd left.
Right.
Okay. And about what time was it that you found out from your father that Perry Berman had returned your call?
That was the problem. I never found out from my dad. He lied to Perry and said that I wasn't there. And I found that out from Perry later. And that's what made me so nervous about the fact that something was going to happen that night. He didn't want me to go out.
All right. And so Perry told you that he had already spoken to your father and that your father said you were out. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay, did Perry tell you anything more about what your father had said? In other words, did he say he's out for the rest of the day, he's out for 5 minutes, he won't be home till tomorrow? Did he give you any more information than that?
I believe he said that I was at the Beverly Center.
Now, did you get any information from Perry as to what time Perry and your father had this phone call?
I don't remember. I think 1 o'clock, but I think he said around 1 o'clock, but it might be that I just know that now. I don't know.
What time did you actually speak to Perry Berman, person to person, that day? What was the first time you spoke to him?
Sometime in the late afternoon, early evening, between 4 and 6, somewhere in there, I believe.
Now, at that time, I believe you had already made plans. Well, let me ask you this. What did you and Perry discuss?
That I wanted to know if he could do something that night. That's why I had called before and left the message. He said that he was going to dinner with a friend and asked me if I wanted to come along. And then he was going to this wine tasting event afterwards. And I told him that I'd meet him at the wine tasting event because I couldn't go out to dinner until my brother came home, and my brother wasn't there, and my brother and I were going to go to a movie. So we'll just meet afterwards. After the movie, I'd drive over.
So during the phone call you had where you spoke directly to Perry Berman, you told him that you were going to the movies that night, correct?
Yes, I did.
And it was your intention at that time to go to the movies, correct?
Right.
Now, I believe, so you'd already decided you wanted to go to the movies before you talked to Perry between 4 and 6 p.m., correct?
Right.
Now, I believe you indicated before lunch that one of the reasons you wanted to be with Perry is you wanted to be around people.
That's right.
Okay, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you want to be around people you knew or people you didn't know, or did it make a difference?
It really didn't make a difference.
Okay, well, if you wanted to be around people, why didn't you just make arrangements to spend the entire evening with Perry? In other words, find out where he's going to go to dinner, tell him you'll meet him there, and take your brother and go to dinner with him. Why didn't you do that?
Say that again. Would you suggest that I tell him? Because I had arrangements to go to the movie.
Okay, but wouldn't you have felt safer being with Perry the entire evening?
Well, either at the movies or with Perry, but the problem was not that. The problem was that I didn't know where my brother was, and he had not returned. And it was actually many, many hours later that my brother returned, so I couldn't leave.
What time was it that your brother left the residence again after he returned at noon?
Right away. We just had a conversation, and then he left.
And at any time, did you go to the Beverly Center that day?
No, I never left the house.
At any time, did your brother indicate to you that he was going to the Beverly Center?
No.
Did he tell you where he was going to go while he was staying away from the house?
No.
All right, so he left again after he came home at noon. He left again at
Right away.
within 15 minutes.
Yeah, something like that.
And did he tell you he'd be in touch with you, or what arrangements did you make to hook up together later?
That we would be going to the movies, and for him to be back certainly before that. So he said he would.
Okay, and what time were you planning to go to the movies?
Whatever the 8 o'clock showing was for Sunday. I knew it at that time. It was either 8:15 or 8 o'clock, something like that.
And it was your intention at that time to go see License to Kill?
No, actually, it was my intention to go see Batman.
But you'd already seen Batman.
Right, but I was supposed to meet a friend there,
Who were you supposed to meet?
a person named Carrie Parker.
Now, when did you make arrangements to go to the movies with Carrie Parker?
Earlier in the week, like either Monday or Tuesday, something in there.
And so you had plans to go to the movies with Carrie Parker to
Right.
see Batman.
Well, he had never seen it, and I had already seen it, and he wanted to see it again. And earlier in the week before this whole thing happened,
Also, there's nothing wrong with seeing a movie a second time if you enjoyed it the first time around. I mean, how many people have gone to the movies multiple times to see, I don't know, some Marvel movie, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, any of those. And the original Batman was pretty good. So movie tickets were not that expensive in those days. It's not like today where they cost an arm and a leg.
I told him I'd go with him. So we arranged to meet at the movies that night to go see Batman. And I was willing to see with him again. And so I just kept those plans.
And the fact that your parents were about to kill you didn't cause you to cancel your plans with Carrie Parker. Is that correct?
No, I thought it was the exact opposite. I was glad that we had the plans, and I had told Erik, let's go to the movies with Carrie Parker and be with somebody and be safe.
Now, when you spoke to the police, you told the police that it was your intention to go see License to Kill, but License to Kill was sold out.
Right.
So was that a lie?
That was a lie because I thought that they might talk to Carrie Parker, and then he would say that I didn't show up at the movies. And I was afraid that that was going to happen because I hadn't shown up. So what I did was say that I went to see License to Kill and it was sold out. And I saw Batman and just hope that they hadn't talked to him. And then if I saw Carrie, I was just going to say that I went to see License to Kill and I'd missed him.
So you thought all this out in the period of time after you killed your parents, but before you went and talked to the police. You thought of all the ramifications of what you were going to say. Is that correct?
Well, there weren't many ramifications. We had decided that we were going to say we were at the movies and that I had plans to go to the movies with Carrie. So I thought, well, that's what we would just say, that we went to the movies and hoped that this guy didn't come forward or they didn't find him, because I knew that he would say that I didn't show up.
Now, Carrie Parker was someone that you knew from having gone to physical rehabilitation. Is that correct?
Right.
And he was somebody who was helping you there, correct?
He was a physical therapist there.
And you had known him for how long before the 20th of August?
Well, I went there quite often, and my whole family, I think my whole family went there. So I'm not sure how long. Since I had moved to Beverly Hills, probably.
And when was it that you made the plans with Carrie Parker to go to the movies on the night of August the 20th?
Sometime around either Monday or Tuesday or something of that sort.
And how did you make the plans? Was it in person or over the phone?
Well, I believe I called him. I either called him or we arranged it. I may have had an appointment, but I think I called him.
And where did you call him?
At his home.
And where was his home?
I don't know. I just knew the number.
Do you remember what the prefix was, the first three numbers?
I know the number of the center. I don't remember. I believe he lives in Long Beach.
And this is also Courtney Plaisted. This is a funny point. Weird word choices she uses. I wonder if she sounds like a walking thesaurus in her everyday life too, or if she saves it for court. This is a lawyer thing. It's a lawyer thing in writing, pleadings and discovery and all kinds of stuff. Lawyers like to use big words because we like to show that we are smart and we know what we're talking about and all that kind of stuff. There's a whole, there are those out there that have opinions, very strong opinions on this, in the legal profession, that you should just use simpler language. You don't need to show everybody you're smart. The way that you show everybody you're smart is by, making superior arguments with the law and the facts. But it's one of those things that lawyers tend to do, and for better or for worse. But it seems like this is just one of her habits.
All right. And where did you call him from? Your home in Beverly Hills?
I assume my home, yeah.
When you say you assumed your home, was there another location from which you could have called Carrie Parker to make these plans?
It could have been that I didn't even call him and we just arranged it when I was there. I have a memory that I arranged it while I was there by just stopping by, because the place is located on Wilshire, and I stopped by to make that definite arrangement, because he had said when we were in therapy he had never seen Batman and the lines were so long. And I said, well, I'll go see it with you. And if you get there first, just wait in line and I'll meet you in line, or vice versa. And so we had set it up for that Sunday because he only had 2 days off, he said.
And which 2 days did he tell you he had off?
Saturday and Sunday, I believe.
Every week he had Saturday and Sunday off?
I believe, yeah. He had 2 days off. I think it was Saturday and Sunday. And the one day he said he always spent with his girlfriend. And so he could see me the other day. And he didn't want to go out too late because he'd have to be back and work the next morning. He worked all day.
And so if you had called him from the Beverly Hills home, your phone records would reflect a phone call to Long Beach, right?
I guess so, if they reflect that, yeah.
Okay. And if you called him from somewhere else or you went by, then your phone records wouldn't reflect that, correct?
Well, if I stopped by the office, then there'd be no phone records, right?
Right. Okay. Is there any other place you could have called him from, Mr. Menendez?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly, I could have called him, I guess, from other places. Phone booths, or if I was driving my parents' car, from the phone in the car. Again, I think I stopped by.
And when was the last time, so would it be your testimony that the last time you had seen Carrie Parker prior to your parents' deaths would have been the Monday or the Tuesday? So that would have been the 13th or the 14th of August. Is that correct?
That's when I believe that I either stopped by or called him. And I'm not sure when my appointment was with him, but I had a shoulder problem. And so I was going in to see him pretty often. I mean, he wasn't really a friend of mine. He was a therapist. And this was the first time we were ever going to get together outside of the clinic. But we liked each other. And so we arranged it.
Now, when you made the phone call to Perry Berman the night that your parents died at 11:07 p.m., you used a U.S. Sprint card, correct?
I may have, yes.
And the U.S. Sprint card, you've seen the records in this case of the phone calls from the Santa Monica Civic on the U.S. Sprint card at 11:07 and 11:15 p.m.?
I probably have seen the records.
May I have a moment, please, Ronnie? May I first, please, Your Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Menendez, I'm showing you an exhibit which is marked as 19. It's phone records, U.S. Sprint phone records, and there's been an agreement that these are from your father's U.S. Sprint phone card. Now, it indicates here that on the 20th of August of 1989, at 11:07 and 11:15 p.m., there were 2 phone calls made from the Santa Monica Civic to area code 213-657-8190. Now, that phone number was Perry Berman's phone number, correct?
Right.
And these 2 transactions reflect a 6-minute and a 1-minute phone call, which you made from the Santa Monica Civic to Perry Berman, correct?
Right.
Now, was there any reason you felt it necessary to use the Sprint card to make this phone call?
That was just what I had done basically all my life, is we used the 800 numbers, either the dad's. I don't know if that's dad's company's number or my mom's. I think it's my father's credit card that my whole family used. I certainly used it all the time because I was traveling and in different places. So I was always using the Sprint card.
Well, was the phone call from Santa Monica to West Hollywood an expensive phone call?
No, but I just always used the Sprint card.
Was there any reason that you wanted to keep records of that phone call? In other words, did you want to have a permanent record of that phone call on the U.S. Sprint records to show that you'd made the call?
No.
So that wasn't anything you thought out in advance?
No.
So I will say, his responses so far, especially in these kind of situations where she seems a bit incredulous of what he's saying are pretty consistent, like body language wise, tone wise. Like he seems like he's just like no, I mean that's the way it was. I used a Sprint card all the time. That's what I used. And her, she's a bit incredulous about it, but I mean, his response is remaining the same in spite of that. Love Dreaming Peach with a question: is it regular lawyering for the lawyer to act like they don't believe anything the witness says? Yeah, I'd say that's fairly normal. I mean, trial is a bit of theater. There is some theater involved in trial. Whether you like it or not, it is a bit more theatrical than, say, well, especially more so than like, any kind of appellate work. So if you're a lawyer and you don't like the prospect of like having to sort of play up emotions and things, that's maybe not the best area of the legal industry to be working in. But of course every lawyer has their own style, but if it's helpful for the advocacy of your case, then yeah, people will do it. It's relatively common.
I believe you indicated then you talked to Perry Berman between 4 and 6 p.m. and you indicated to him that you would meet him at the Taste of LA festival, whatever it was, at the Santa Monica Civic at the conclusion of the movie. Is that correct?
Right.
And at that time, did you know what time the movie would get out?
No.
Okay, but you knew at that time that the movie would start at either 8 or 8:15, correct?
Something like that, yeah.
And you knew at that time that most movies run approximately 2 hours, correct?
Yes.
All right, so that if the movie got out between 10 and 10:15, what was your state of mind as to when you were going to see Perry Berman at the Taste of LA? Let's say the movie got out at 10 and you had to travel from Century City to Santa Monica.
Right.
Okay. What was your state of mind as to when you were going to actually get to Santa Monica and meet up with Perry Berman?
Didn't have any specific time. I mean, that really wasn't important. That was just something I did because, the important thing was to try and get tickets at that point. That's why we went to the theater. So it wasn't like we have to meet Perry by this time. He never said a specific time he would be there. I was hoping it ran late, and I just missed him.
But Mr. Menendez, when you made the plans to meet Perry Berman that afternoon, you've told these juries that you didn't know then that you were going to have to kill your parents that night.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Okay. So at the time, if what you're telling us is correct, at the time that you talked to Perry Berman, you had fully intended to go to the movies for 2 hours, drive to Santa Monica, and meet up with Perry Berman, correct?
Right.
All right. So leaving aside what happened after the murders, beforehand, you indicated that it was your state of mind that you were going to do these two functions that night, correct?
That's right. And that's what I told Perry, that we would be at the movies. And as soon as the movie was over, I would drive over and meet him at the Taste of LA. He said, fine.
All right. And you didn't indicate it to him what time you'd be there. Is that correct?
No, whatever time it took to get to the movie to the Taste of LA.
Now, so you've now told us that you also had plans to meet with Carrie Parker that night. Is that correct?
Right.
That's something that you didn't mention in your direct testimony, correct?
No, I didn't mention that. I did. I think that I had mentioned that I told my mother that I was late and was supposed to meet a friend at the movies.
All right, but you never mentioned the name of Carrie Parker until this afternoon, correct?
Right.
All right, and so it's your testimony here today that approximately 6 to 7 days before the 20th of August, you had already made plans to meet Carrie Parker at the movies that night,
Right.
and that you had no other contact with Carrie Parker during the week to finalize or whatever these arrangements. In other words, what did you tell Carrie when you made these plans?
That was his day off, he told me, because the other day he spent with his girlfriend. He wanted to see Batman. And so one of us figured out the time that it was playing, and we arranged to meet at that time. And that's what we did before this all even happened.
Okay, and the reason you told the police you went to License to Kill is what? So that later on you could say, I'm not understanding. Why is it you told the police you wanted to see License to Kill, but you intended to see Batman?
Well, I just wasn't sure what was going to happen with Carrie. And I told the police that we went to see License to Kill because when we got there, we knew that it was sold out because that's what the lady said. And so we would say that it was sold out and we went to see Batman. And I didn't really put a whole lot of thought into it other than that would be what we would say. And then if I had talked to Carrie, I would say that I went to see the other movie.
Right, after you made your arrangements with Perry Berman, let's say those arrangements occurred at 6 p.m.
Right.
What did you do next?
I just waited for my brother.
And about what time was it that your brother came home?
I don't remember exactly, but I think around 9:45, 9, somewhere in there, very late, close to 10 o'clock.
But you and your brother had plans to go to the movies.
Right. And we were missing the plans because he was so late. But I felt I couldn't leave.
All right. And so what time was it then that your mother said you couldn't go to the movies? When was it your mom said you can't go to the movies? Was that before your brother got home or after?
That was in the argument we had right before this all happened.
Yes. Was that before or after your brother got home?
It was after my brother got home, and I had the conversation with him, tell him what happened during the day and that my dad had lied to Perry. And I was sort of frantic to get out of the house, told him we got to get out of the house, and was upset that he was so late. And I went to tell my mother that we were leaving, that I had to meet a friend at the movies and that we were late. And that's when she told me that we couldn't go out. And I asked her why, and she started stammering. And my dad came in and we had this huge fight.
Now, what time was it that you had the discussion with your father where you went into the den and he said something about tennis camp not mattering? Could you tell us about that again, please?
That was sometime in the afternoon, and I had first time I decided to go over to the house, and I had gone in and I had said hello and they hadn't answered me, and I went into the kitchen, and when I decided to make another attempt and sit down and watch the tennis, and at some point I wanted to get some reaction out of my dad because it was making me so nervous that they weren't speaking to me. So I just asked this question that I knew we had talked about before about the unarmed arbitrage camp. I asked him if I could get the number.
Now, I believe you testified earlier that Perry Berman led you to believe that he had called back your house around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and at that time your father had said you weren't home, correct?
Right.
Okay. Did you go into the house and talk to your father after 1 o'clock?
Yes.
All right. So you hadn't seen your father all day up until you went in there. Is that correct?
That's right.
And you hadn't made your presence known in any other way by calling the house or anything else. Is that correct?
That's right.
All right. So then you indicated that when Perry told you that your father said you weren't home, that scared you.
That's right.
Okay. But how did your father know you were home if you hadn't seen him all morning?
Well, I guess he couldn't be sure, but he certainly knew I wasn't at the Beverly Center. Why would he say that? I mean, I didn't think about that. I just assumed if I got a call from Perry, he would have come out and see if I was in the guest house, which was normally where I would be, and say, Perry's on the line. He'd like to talk to you.
Well, but your brother was gone, right? And do you know what your brother told your parents in regards to why he was leaving the house?
No, but he didn't leave with me.
But your brother, you don't know whether or not your brother told your father that he was going to the Beverly Center.
No,
right?
I don't know that.
All right. So why was it so alarming to you that your father had said you weren't home when there was no way for your father to know that you were in the guest house hiding?
There was a way. He could have walked over like I would have expected and said, your friend Perry is on the line. Would you like to talk to him? Or something, or my mother could have came over.
But wasn't it just as reasonable to assume that you were off with your brother Erik, as you often were?
Well, when Perry said that, I just didn't see it as reasonable. It freaked me out very badly, actually. I was sure that my dad had lied on purpose and excuse to Perry that we were off somewhere, or I was off somewhere, and hoping, I guess, that Perry wasn't going to call back.
Well, it wasn't like he told Perry that you were out of the country or out of town, or, I mean, he didn't say he's out of the country and won't be back for 6 months.
No, because Perry had said he was returning my call.
Right.
So obviously I was there.
And it wasn't like you were out of town, that you just left for San Diego for the weekend. Your father didn't tell Perry anything like that.
Right, because he was returning my call, and my father would have known that's why he was calling. I'm returning Lyle's call, I assume, and to say that he's out at the Beverly Center without checking and so on, I didn't see it as reasonable. For me, it was panic.
It was very ominous.
Yes.
And you never considered that was just a mistake your father had made.
No.
So then you said between 6 and 9:45, you simply waited for your brother to come home. Is that correct?
That's right.
And what were you doing? Where were you, first of all, during that period of time?
In my house.
And what were you doing?
Just waiting.
Where was the gun?
The gun was in my room,
In your bedroom.
in my closet.
Now, I believe you indicated when you slept, you kept it next to your bed. Is that correct?
I kept it in my bed. Yes.
And then during the day, you moved it to another location?
Well, I hid it in the closet just because I felt like if I wasn't in the house with the gun at night, I shouldn't, obviously I was going to hide it in the closet. Nobody ever really went over there. My mother didn't go in there, and neither did the maid wasn't there that whole weekend, so that wouldn't matter. But nobody ever went in the guest house, but I put it in the closet anyway, just in case.
And you knew the maid wasn't there that weekend because she was never there on the weekends, right?
Right.
And this, the killing of your parents occurred at a time when the maid wasn't home, correct?
Right.
And you knew that the maid was not going to be home that night, correct?
Well, the maid was not there on the weekends.
You knew she didn't come back till Monday morning.
Probably come back Monday morning.
Now, in this discussion, when you went back into the house and your parents were in the den and your father wouldn't talk to you, you said you tried to get them to talk to you about the camp, correct? The tennis camp?
Right.
And then what was the reply of your parents?
Well, I was talking to my dad. I asked him if I could get the number of the unknown arbitrage camp, and he said, "What does it matter anymore?" In a sarcastic way. And that's when I didn't talk to him again.
Did you find that comment, "What does it matter anymore," to be a threat on your life?
I did, and also not answering me when I came in, and then that comment to me was just his way of saying that, you're going to die. What does it matter? You're not going to be here. He had already, it was like we were ghosts already. It made me feel very, very panicked. You have to understand, at this point in the weekend, I was already shaken and thinking that this was going to happen. My mother had just made the comment the night before. I had just found out in the morning what had happened to my brother that night. I was very unstable, and comments like that really affected me.
Okay, so when your father made this comment to you about what does it matter anymore, you felt that death was imminent. Is that correct?
No, I just felt that was a sarcastic way of him saying that I was going to die.
What was he doing when he said this to you? Was he sharpening a knife or anything like that? What was he doing?
He was just looking at me, and he had been watching tennis.
He was watching tennis on TV. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. So then you felt that this was another sign that your parents were going to kill you. Is that correct?
Yes.
And did your mother join in and say, yes, that's correct? What does it matter anymore? Did she do anything to affirm that comment of your father?
No, she didn't answer me when I came in, and she didn't say anything the whole time I was there that I remember.
Okay. But you decided then that this had added to your sense of foreboding. Is that correct?
It did, yes.
So you got in your car and you went out and waited for your brother so he wouldn't come into the house where he might be killed, right?
No.
Why didn't you do something like that, Mr. Menendez?
No, I went back to my guest house and waited, and I knew my brother was going to be coming home that night.
And you and your brother had plans to go to the movies at 8 o'clock with your friend Carrie Parker, correct?
Right.
But he came home much later, is that correct?
Yes, he did.
And when he came home, did he explain to you why he was so late?
Well, we didn't waste time on that. I just told him what had happened, mostly with the phone call with Perry and the comment my dad had made, and that we had to get out of the house because I was sure that something was going to happen that night. At least I was thinking that something was going to happen that night.
And so you discussed with your brother the plan that you wanted to get out of the house, correct?
It wasn't a plan. He came and we had this very fast discussion. It was basically me talking and said, we got to get out of the house.
So you went and got in your car and you left.
Well, I wasn't able to do that. I went and I talked to my mother and told her we were leaving. And that's when she said that we couldn't go out.
Well, that when she said you couldn't go out, that added to your fear, right?
Well, not until I asked her why and she didn't have an answer. Then that added to my fear greatly, yes.
So you turned around and went out the door and got in your car and drove away.
No, I didn't get to do that either because my dad came in, heard the argument, and came in and basically became a huge fight in which he was ordering my brother upstairs and I was saying, you're not going to touch my brother. And he was responding. And there were other things said that I don't remember so well, but it turned into this big fight. So I never got to the car to go out to the movies.
But you did have the opportunity to go out and get your gun.
Well, once I believed that they were going to kill us when my dad closed the door, then I ran upstairs and then decided to get my gun.
So the closing of the doors was the last straw, correct?
The closing of the doors to me, it was the last thing that I remember that caused me to just totally freeze and panic and realize that it was happening. But it was a series of things. It really wasn't just one comment or one incident. It was a series of things after 3 days of just being shaken and wondering when it's going to happen and ominous comments. And at that point, I just was sure that was it. And we had been wondering when it was going to happen. And I was sure that was it. And I ran upstairs and my brother felt the same way. And I ran to get my gun.
This is what really happened, Mr. Menendez?
That's what really happened.
All right, so then you went back to the guest house to get your weapon. Is that correct?
Yes.
And at the time, there was a phone in your house, correct?
Yes.
And you knew how to dial 911, right?
Yes.
But you didn't.
No.
Even though you were now sure that you were going to die.
Right. All I was thinking was to just run as fast as I could and give me the best chance.
Well, why didn't you just run out the back gate?
Well, for one thing, my brother was in the house and I wasn't going to leave him. And I just didn't think of that. I thought my best chance was
To kill your parents.
to get my gun and go to where they were.
May I approach, please, Your Honor? Now, Mr. Menendez,
Right. So there's
This
the whole, he said that if we called the cops and they came in and even if there was a trial and, my father was convicted or my mother was convicted and they were in jail, they could still get to us. That is an understandable explanation. That logic makes sense. You can go from A to B to C and understand it. She keeps wanting to hit him over the head with like, well, why didn't you call the cops? Why didn't you call the cops? And this is something about abuse too, that comes up a lot. It's come up with the Russell Brand accusations, right? Why did these women go to journalists instead of going to the cops? And that's a legitimate question to ask. Sometimes the answer is reasonable. Sometimes the answer is not so reasonable. In this case, that sounds like a reasonable answer, right? To say, look, this guy is so powerful, especially locally powerful, that we thought that, if we tried to use the system to get, justice or restitution or to just stop the abuse, that it would not work because of the fact that he was so closely tied to the system. We didn't really understand how it worked, but he did. And he had fingerprints all over this local area. So what chance did we have against him within this system? That's something that can make sense. It can make a lot of sense.
This exhibit appears to show the entry of your house. This is the first floor of the home that you lived in at the time this was built, correct?
Right.
And I believe you testified on your direct examination that you went into the guest house and then you went somewhere else in the house. Could you tell me where it was you went after you went to the house, the guest house, which is in the back of this diagram? Okay.
Right.
You came up from the guest house, and where did you go?
Around the side of the house to the outside.
When you say the side of the house, are you talking about towards the living room here?
No. My guest house is over here.
Right.
Right about here.
Okay.
And there's a little pool here and a very small grassy area. And I ran around the side. There's a little grassy section that goes around the side of the outside of the house.
Past the living room.
Right.
Okay, and towards the front of the house.
It goes right into the sally port, yes.
All right, and then you went towards the front of the house where the cars were normally parked. Is that correct?
Where my brother's car was with the ammunition, yes.
Okay, now I think you testified already that the gun was loaded.
Right.
Okay, and you had loaded it when you got in the car on the way home from San Diego, right?
Right.
All right, so why did you go get ammunition if the gun was loaded?
Well, I wanted to put in the ammunition that the guy had recommended. That I had never done that. And so I ran to the car and my brother was there and we reloaded.
Okay, now you already had a loaded gun.
Right.
Okay, and there was ammunition in the gun.
Yeah, there was, but I wanted to, it was just in my mind that I had to get the kind, that I had not reloaded the gun, even though we had bought the ammunition that the guy said we were supposed to use. And so I had to change it.
Oh, so you were going to change the ammunition.
Yes, I did.
All right, well, when was it you found out that you didn't have the right ammunition in your gun? Was it after you bought the gun?
No, at some point after I bought the gun, I had that concern that it was maybe not the right ammunition.
So you went to a gun shop and you made inquiries, correct?
Right.
And you found out what?
He basically just, after a long explanation about ammunition and guns, told us this is what you should use. And that's what I bought.
So you bought a second box of ammunition?
Right. And I believe it's different than what we bought originally.
And what day was it that you bought the second box of ammunition?
Saturday, like around the middle of the day, right before we left on the fishing trip.
And you were concerned that you'd have to use this gun for self-defense, correct?
Right.
So when you got home from getting the second type of ammunition on Saturday, you immediately changed the ammunition in the gun, right?
No, because buying the ammunition was just basically my concern about the ammunition, but also to waste time so I could arrive late and hopefully miss the fishing trip. That's what was on my mind, was the fishing trip and the problem with that. And when we got home, we immediately rushed, went on the fishing trip, and I'd never really, I probably had an opportunity, but I had never thought about it and just hadn't changed it.
Okay, so you bought the ammunition because you wanted better ammunition, but you bought the ammunition because you wanted to be late.
Right, both reasons.
Okay, so you're saying now you didn't have time to change the ammunition before you went on the trip, right?
Right.
Okay, so when you came home.
Well, yeah, before I went on the trip, right.
So-
I really wasn't thinking about it. Buying the ammunition, I knew that I couldn't have shotguns on the boat, and so buying the ammunition is one of the things that I had thought about Friday night, that I had better check and see if it's the right ammunition and so on. But mainly I was trying to figure out how we could miss the trip and in a non-suspicious way. So driving around and, the ammunition store was one of the places we went.
When you came home and you saw that your parents' cars were still in the driveway, and you wanted to miss the trip, why didn't you just turn around and go down the block?
Well, I don't know. I saw the cars and I was surprised that they were still there and they hadn't left. And I was sort of hoping for that. And I pulled in, and again, I did not want to. I could have just not shown up at all, but I didn't want to bring it to a head where my dad knew that I was basically going to disregard his insistence to go on the trip and make him nervous to the point of definitely thinking I'm going to run to the police and doing something immediately. And we weren't positive about the trip. So we felt there was nothing we could do. We would just wait and see And I really just got caught up in going on the trip and sort of, I just didn't think clearly.
If you wanted to miss the trip, all you had to do is just not come home.
Yes, but then, that would have brought things to a head. You couldn't just tell my dad no like that. And so I didn't want him to get nervous and think, oh, these, that Lyle and Erik are doing things together, that something strange is going on. They're not going on the trip, and we would have had this big argument. And then, they would have thought we were going to go straight to the police or let them know what was going on. And I thought that would make it more dangerous than it already was.
Then why were you trying to miss the trip?
I was hoping to miss the trip in a way that could be explained, like we were just late and they would just leave.
Well, why didn't you just do that?
I tried. We showed up about an hour late or so, and they had just postponed it. They just waited, and we were late to the fishing thing.
But if your parents hadn't postponed it, then your father would have thought that you and your brother were out telling people that he was a child molester, and it would have brought things to a head. So I don't understand. What if you were either going to be late or you weren't going to be late?
Right.
Right?
I was hoping to be late enough that they would just go, and I would have felt much more relieved if we would have got home an hour or so late, and they would have already left. And then I would have known the fishing trip had nothing to do with arranging to kill us. But they waited, and that made me even more nervous. But I didn't feel there was anything I could do about it. I wasn't willing to have this major fight and not go and bring everything to a head and make my dad even more nervous, because I had not spoken to him about this since Thursday, and we had left the situation very bad, and I didn't want to make it worse.
And you found it nerve-wracking that your family waited for you to get home before they went on a family outing? That was something very peculiar?
Well, this trip, we had expressed, and either my mom or I guess my mom, that we really didn't want to go on the trip. And I don't think we were even expected to go on the trip originally. It just wasn't the type of thing that my dad would allow me to waste so many hours in the middle of the day on a boat trip instead of playing tennis. And it wasn't until Friday night that suddenly there was an insistence that we go. And to me, that was a big deal. And my mom was delivering the message. So, if they would have just gone, I would have felt better. But them waiting an hour, postponing the trip, when this trip was supposed to be for my dad, not for us, was to me a big deal.
So when you decided it was time that your parents were going to kill you because they closed the doors, you had time to change ammunition, right?
It wasn't that I had time. It was one of the things I did in rushing to get into the house.
And during that period of time, did it occur to you that rather than burst in on your parents and shoot them to death, you could go to the police, you could leave home, you could do something other than what you were about to do?
It didn't occur to me.
But
we had already talked about all those things, and we had not done those things. And when this happened, and I was sure that this was it, all I was thinking about was how fast I could get into the house.
While still stopping to change the ammunition.
Yes.
Did you practice changing the ammunition before you did it that night?
Only putting the other shells in and figuring out how the gun worked originally.
So then you popped all the shells out, right?
Right.
You put all the new shells in, right?
Right.
How many shells did you put in the shotgun, Mr. Menendez?
I'm not sure. Maybe all the way. I had a bunch of shells, and I was trying to sort out, take only the ones that were the new ones, which were a different color. And so I was grabbing the new ones and putting them in. And I grabbed a bunch, and I was putting them in sort of as I was moving. And I put some in my pocket and just ran in. Followed my brother.
All right, now, did you run in through the front door?
No.
Did you run in through the den?
Right.
Okay, on what, a French door that leads out into the front of the house?
Right. It's like, I don't know what French door is exactly, but there's a couple window doors, and that one was already open because my brother had gone through there to get out, I guess.
All right, so you and your brother went in through this door, which I take it normally your mother kept locked, right?
I'm not really sure. I mean, all the doors were locked that one night, but normally the house was not locked.
Right, and so, all the doors were locked that night. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay, you told the police the doors were unlocked. You
No,
talked to them.
when I say that night, I meant when we had the argument on Saturday, and she had locked the house, and I had gone around, like I said, and checked all the doors, and they were locked.
All right, so you and your brother went in through the den, you went down the hallway, is that correct?
Right.
And then you went to the closed doors of the family room, is that correct?
Right. We just pushed those doors open.
You burst through the doors.
Right.
Is burst the right word? Did you burst through the doors?
Push is the right word.
All right, and in this room, there was a television set here on the wall that says storage. Is that correct, where the TV set was?
Right.
Now, in addition to having this set of French doors into the family room, there are French or glass doors that go out onto this patio, correct?
Right.
And there's also a door from the kitchen into the family room.
Right.
Now, I take it before you and your brother burst in to kill your parents, you looked through these doors to see what they were doing.
No, we weren't even sure they were going to necessarily be in that room, but I was hoping. And we just burst through the doors, and that's when I saw the shadows of people to the right, and I knew they were in the room.
Did you ever think to go into the kitchen and look through the door from the kitchen into that room?
We didn't think we had time to be waiting and looking and stuff. I was just running as fast as I could, and so was my brother, and he got there first, and we just went right through the doors. And as soon as I saw something, I started firing. There was no time to just be watching and trying to see where they were exactly and so on.
Now, your brother went into the room before you, is that correct?
Right.
Who fired first, you, your brother, or you?
Han Solo did.
I really don't know. I fired right away.
As soon as you got through the door, you started firing?
Right.
Okay. And you have no idea what your parents were doing right before you started firing, is that correct?
I don't have any idea. I thought they were in the process of looking for us.
Well, if they were in the process of looking for you, why would they be locked up in the den?
I didn't know.
I see comments in the chat. I know. Sorry guys, I couldn't help myself. Anytime someone asks who shot first, I'm like, who, like, is there anyone that doesn't think of Star Wars with that question? Anyway, all right, let's continue on.
I didn't know where they were. All I knew was they had been waiting for my brother to get home. Also, my brother was now home. We were not supposed to leave, and that my brother was supposedly, my dad was probably thinking, waiting upstairs, and he had closed the doors, and they were now going to do it. And that was all that I was thinking. And I was going to burst through the doors and start firing.
With guns blazing, right?
Right.
Now, you've had an opportunity to look at the crime scene photographs, haven't you?
No, except when they were here.
Well, yes, in court. Have you had an opportunity to look at them in court?
I looked at some of them, yes.
You're aware of the fact that there were 2 misses through the French doors that lead out into the backyard, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, misstates the testimony.
There may have been.
All the other shots hit the targets, didn't they?
I have no idea. The room was dark. As soon as you fired, there was smoke. And we were firing. I remember glass shattering, and I remember that there were huge noises that seemed all around me, and I was just firing as many times as I could.
Did you listen to the coroner testify about the wounds that your parents had?
Yes.
Now, do you remember that your father had a wound to his left leg? Do you remember that wound above his knee?
I don't remember that wound.
Okay.
But
Coroner testified that the wound occurred from the inside of the thigh to the outside of the thigh, correct?
I think I remember that, yes.
Okay. Now, when you were firing, it's your testimony that you were firing from the direction of the door. Is that correct?
I was firing in the direction of whoever was right there, which was my dad.
Okay, so you came in through the French doors and you just started to fire. Is that correct?
When I saw something move toward me, I fired at it.
And when the thing moved towards you, it wasn't armed with any kind of weapon, was it?
Well, it was my dad, and I didn't know that. I thought that they were armed.
With what?
Guns.
From where?
I thought they were in the process of killing us. I thought that they had guns. We assumed they had planned this in advance.
Now, this is Exhibit 20. And this is a larger picture of the room in which your parents were killed, correct?
Right.
And you see there's a table, there's a sectional couch, a coffee table, and the place where the television is, correct?
Right.
Right. So you came in through the French doors preceded by your brother, right?
My brother in front of me. Right.
Okay. And your father was off to your right, and it's your
Right.
testimony that he was rising. He was
I don't
standing
know
up.
if he was. No, I just saw. I couldn't see his body that well. All I could see was that there was somebody there, and that was coming forward.
Now, right before you came into this room, had you been in darkness? In other words, had you been you've been outdoors, right, loading the gun,
Right.
and it was dark outside.
Yes.
Okay, and when you came in through the house, was the house dark?
No, the foyer was lit.
All right, and then when you came into this room, it was dark again?
Right.
But the television set was on, wasn't it?
I saw later that it was on. Yes.
All right, and there was light coming from the television set when you went into the room.
Yes, there was.
Were there lights on in the kitchen at that time?
I don't remember.
All right, and it's your
May have
testimony
been.
now today that when you got into the room, you couldn't see very well. Is that correct?
Right. You couldn't see very well at all.
I mean, it kind of makes sense from his explanation of we were in like the other parts of the house that had lights on, and then we went into a darker room. It takes time for your eyes to adjust, even if the TV was on at the time. Like that's still a very low light setting.
Now, you started shooting at your father. By the way, did anyone make any noise? Did your parents make any noise as they were being killed?
They may have. I didn't hear any noise. All I could hear was the booming noises from the guns.
Now, the wound to your father's leg, which starts on the inside of his thigh and goes to the outside, how did he get that?
I have no idea.
Well, if he was on the sofa, someone would have had to be either behind the sofa or over in this area in order to have inflicted the wound on his thigh.
Objection argumentative.
Is that a question?
Would they have?
I don't think he was on the sofa. I think he was standing right around, like in front of that coffee table, which I don't remember being in the position that it is there. It was straight, and he was standing in front of it, like on this side of it.
All right, and do you remember where on his body you shot him the first time you shot him?
No,
Do you know where your mother was when you started shooting your father?
somewhere to his right.
Could you see her when you started shooting your father?
I could see someone over to the right, yes.
Where was your brother when you started shooting your father?
He was somewhere in that part of the room. He had run into that part of the room.
When you say in that part of the room, near the coffee table?
Like in front of the television set. I don't know, he was off to my left.
Was
I
he-
wasn't thinking about my brother. I was just thinking about firing.
Excuse me, Your Honor, can I ask if this drawing is supposed to be to scale or not?
Well, is this an exhibit?
Yes, it's an exhibit.
What exhibit number is it?
It's 20.
All right. All right, well, we'll deal with that later.
Right, are we going to take an afternoon break, Your Honor?
Yes, you tell me, as well as all other participants in the trial, and we'll resume with the cross-examination.
Thank you. Leaving what we were talking about before the break, Mr. Menendez, for a while, when you spoke with Carrie Parker about going to the movies on August the 20th, what did you and he agree to?
I didn't speak to him on the 20th. I spoke to him like a week before.
Yes, the week before the 20th, when you spoke to him, what did you and he agree to? What was your understanding of how and
That
when?
we would see that showing of Batman.
Did you check the newspaper listings to see if it was showing at a particular time in a particular theater?
I believe so. One of us did. He just knew that he didn't want to go to the really late showing because he said he had to get up early for work, and he works like 10 hours a day. And so he thought that would be fine. That would be good. And he'd just meet me there.
And so you had no agreement that you would finalize your plans later on in the week. Is that correct?
No.
So when you left or finished your phone conversation with Mr. Parker, it was your impression that you need do nothing further in order to see him on Sunday night at the 8 o'clock showing of Batman at the Century 14 Theaters, correct?
Right.
Right. Now, after you finished killing your parents, I believe you testified on direct that you threw down your guns.
Right.
Okay. And where did you throw the guns?
Well, I don't remember the whole thing very well, but I do remember dropping my gun, I believe, and walking into the foyer.
So did you drop your gun in the room in which you killed your parents?
Yes.
Okay. And you walked into the foyer, correct?
Right.
Was your brother already there or did he follow you?
I don't remember my brother being there until I was against the wall and looked over and saw him.
And when you looked over and saw him, did you and he have any kind of discussion at that time?
Not at that time.
Okay. What happened then?
Well, I wanted to talk to him. I was too exhausted, and I believe I just closed my eyes and stayed against the wall. And at some point, I was able to get up, and we did talk.
Where did you talk?
In the foyer, I believe.
And what did you talk about?
The fact that the police had not come and what we wanted to do about that.
How much time had elapsed from the time that the last shot was fired and the time that you and your brother commented that the police had not come?
I couldn't tell you exactly.
Well, could you give me an approximation?
Between 5 and 10 minutes, I guess.
During that discussion with your brother about the fact that the police hadn't come, did you discuss calling the police yourself?
Well, that's what we were discussing. We discussed not doing that.
Did you discuss the possibility of doing it and then reject the idea? Or did you just start off, we're not calling the police? How did that go?
I don't remember very well, but I believe it was the basic thing was that the amazement that the police had not shown up, and what we wanted to do about that, and basically not sure if we could think of anything that we wouldn't get caught eventually anyway when they did show up eventually, when somebody had to call 911 and report it to them. So we didn't really think about it there. We just decided that we were going to try and avoid being arrested and questioned. So we left.
All right. Now, how long did this talk with your brother in the foyer take?
Not very long, because I remember talking to him and then thinking to myself, at that point when we decided that we were going to try and avoid them knowing it was us, that they might still show up somehow. Maybe they were just, I just had this sense that now that we had made this decision, now they might show up. And so I wanted to get out of the house fast. And at some point I had, reached the idea that I wanted to pick up the shells, or one of us did. I really don't know who it was. And so we decided to do that first. But I was very concerned about getting out of the house, so we didn't stay there and decide what we were going to tell them and all that. We just wanted to leave first. So after we picked up the shells, we got in the car, and then that's when we started discussing that we would say we were at the movies.
So when you made the decision to pick up the shells, was that something you discussed with your brother or something that a decision you made on your own?
I really don't remember.
But it was your state of mind at the time that you needed to pick up the shells because of fingerprints.
Right.
And before you loaded the gun and went in the house, did you think about the fingerprints Or was it after you killed your parents that the idea,
No, it was, sorry.
after you killed your parents that the idea came to you?
Right.
It was afterwards.
It was after.
And you were very upset at that time, correct?
No, I was feeling numb and exhausted and very, very just in shock of what had happened. And I mean, it's hard to describe what I was feeling because I was sort of numb. But certainly at that point, this new thing that something bad was going to happen with the police and to get out of there.
Would you say that you were thinking clearly during the time that you made the decision to pick up the shotgun shells?
No, definitely not.
Were you confused?
Yes.
Were you frightened?
Yes.
And yet you still had the presence of mind, did you not, to think about fingerprints?
The thought came to me about fingerprints, and so I picked up the shells.
I love how it's like they were damned if they were messy. They were damned if they were not messy. Like all of these decisions that they made, if, about going to the movies and seeing people and all of this, like everything after the killing, these decisions that they made to try to, kind of like look normal or sort of like craft an alibi after the fact. All of that was very messy, and she kind of goes through the logic of like, that doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense. But then when he makes a decision that kind of makes sense, she's like, oh, well, that just makes too much sense. It's a little bit, I mean, hey, whatever, it's within her rights on cross-examination to play both sides, I suppose, but just as an observer, it doesn't make much sense to me.
How many shells did you pick up?
Well, we ended up picking up all of them, but I really didn't know at the time. We just were sort of, I don't remember that well. And I do remember being very surprised that we had picked up all of them, because there was no attempt that I remember to search carefully or anything of that sort, just the ones that were in plain view. And
What lighting did you use to pick up the shotgun shells?
we turned on the lights.
Were you at all concerned that by turning on the lights, you might observe anybody, you might cause someone to notice that a light had gone on in the house after all these loud noises had gone on?
Well, we weren't thinking. I didn't think that at all.
You weren't thinking.
No.
But you were thinking about fingerprints, which could incriminate you and cause you to be arrested, right?
Right.
And you were thinking very clearly.
But they weren't thinking about the lighting being noticeable to other people in the vicinity. Like, it's so strange to me why she thinks that this is such a strong point to hammer in. Like, you were thinking clearly about some things, not thinking clearly about some others. That fits with the defense narrative.
Clearly that you did not want to be arrested, correct?
Yeah, not clearly, but that I did not want to have to explain what happened, and I did not want to be arrested. And a lot of the decisions don't make sense, but I just wasn't thinking clearly.
But you were thinking clearly about the fingerprints, right?
Not really, but it was a thought that I had.
Yes.
Just
Yes.
came to me fingerprints.
He happened to think clearly about one thing that night, and maybe just the one thing. But there was one thing that he did think clearly about, and that was fingerprints. Maybe not the lighting, maybe not the noise, maybe not any of these other things that could have made it very obvious what was happening in that house to other people and the neighbors and all that kind of. It's like, okay, so yeah, he happened to think clearly about one thing that night. It's so frustrating.
I just had no thought before all this happened about somebody finding out and so on. It just wasn't in my mind.
And that helps the defense case, because he says, I had no thought in my mind about any of this before this all happened. I was trying to scramble to come up with something to sort of help ourselves in this situation. That fits with a lack of premeditation.
And so suddenly I was having to think about the police and whether they could figure out that we were involved. And then that's when these things started coming to me about fingerprints and having to say that we were someplace and getting rid of the guns and things like that.
Did you go over to either one of your parents when you went to recover the shells and check to see if they still had a pulse?
No.
Were you fairly confident that they were both dead?
Yes.
And you knew that because you'd inflicted a contact wound to the back of your father's head, correct?
I really wasn't thinking about that at the time. I just knew that they were dead.
You were sure of that, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, when you went to pick up the shells, did your brother help you?
Yes.
And did any of the shells have blood on them or any kind of tissue on them that you can recall?
I don't remember.
Did you have to go into the area where your parents were found? That is, between the coffee table and the sofa. Did you have to go into there to get any of the shells?
I don't believe that I did. Again, I just remember picking up the ones that were in plain view. But maybe my brother did, but I don't have any memory of it.
When you say in plain view, in what areas were the shotgun shells in plain view?
I really don't have any memory of picking them up, actually picking them up, but I do remember being surprised that we got them all and remembering that I hadn't done any search or anything, that I had just had this idea to pick up the shells, and I really didn't even know if it was an idea that made any sense at all, but it just seemed like the thing that I should do, and so I picked up the shells. And I remember not searching, not taking the time because of this concern that the police might come, so we left. And I found out later that we did pick up all the shells.
Did you go behind the sofa, between the sofa and the French doors, to retrieve any of the shells?
I didn't. No.
Did you see your brother go into that area at the time that you were recovering the shells?
I don't have any memory of picking up the shells, only that I did not go into little areas searching, just that things were in plain view.
And you didn't go up and touch either of your parents in your attempts to get the shotgun shells, is that correct?
No.
Okay. How long did it take you to enter the room, pick up the shells, and then leave the room?
I'm not sure. Very quickly, maybe a minute.
And where did you put the shells once you had recovered them?
Well, I really don't remember, but I assume I put them in my pockets or carried them with the guns and went to the car.
When you left the room, you got the guns, is that correct?
Right.
Did you get 2 guns or 1 gun?
I don't remember. We ended up taking both of them, but I don't know if I picked up both guns or none, and Erik did. I don't remember.
Okay. And then you left that room, is that correct?
Yes.
Where did you go next?
Well, we went out front to the car and immediately left.
Now, you had blood on you, didn't you?
I may have. I'm sure I did.
You took a shower, didn't you?
No.
You went into the guest house afterwards and you took a shower.
No. I left immediately because I thought the police may still show up. I certainly was not going to wait around and take a shower. I left and tried to make it in time to the theaters and the guns, and still an idea to meet Perry at some point. So, I mean, it wasn't that I was going to hang out in the house. I just felt like the police might come and we should get out of there and then think about what we were going to say and do.
Do you know who Marzie Eisenberg is?
Yes, she was one of my dad's secretaries.
Did you speak to Miss Eisenberg shortly after you killed your parents?
I'm
Like the
sure
Monday?
I did at the company functions, the day of the memorial service.
You talked to Miss Eisenberg on the telephone, either the Monday or the Tuesday after your parents were killed.
I don't remember that, but it's possible.
Did you tell Miss Eisenberg that at the time your parents were killed, you were in the shower in the guest house?
I really doubt that I would have told her something that different from what I told the police. No way.
So
I
you're saying-
wouldn't have told her that.
So you're saying here today in court that you did not tell your father's secretary, Marzie Eisenberg, that you were in the shower at the time that your parents were killed?
No.
Now, when the police got to the location later on, they noticed that the door to the guest house and all the lights were on inside the guest house.
Okay.
Why was the door open and why were the lights on?
I guess because I had just, the last time I had been in there, I had to run in to get the gun and run out and wasn't concerned about the doors.
And it wasn't because you'd been inside of there taking a shower after you killed your parents, correct?
No, I did not take a shower anytime that night after my parents were killed.
And you have no recollection of any blood being on you, is that correct?
It's possible that at the gas station when he would change his pants and I was doing things that I don't even remember washing my hands in any way, but I suppose I might have. But I certainly was not taking a shower in the guest house.
So you went to the front of the house and you got into a car. Which car did you get into?
Eric's.
That was the Ford Escort?
Right.
And where did you go?
Well, I took a right, and I eventually just started driving down I believe the next street.
Now, when you say you took a right, you turned right from your driveway going north on Elm Drive towards Sunset. Is that correct?
That's right.
And did you actually make it up to Sunset, or did you turn? There's another street that runs parallel to Sunset before you get to Sunset, right?
Right.
Did you turn on that street, or did you go all the way to Sunset?
I turned on that street, I believe, but I can't remember if we went to the theater first or went to drop the guns off first for some reason. I think we went to the theater first, but I don't remember. I know I definitely made a turn. I'm pretty sure I made a turn so I could get out of the immediate area.
And which way did you turn?
I don't remember.
Well, I believe you indicated you took Coldwater up to Mulholland. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that would have required you to turn, when you went north on Elm to go towards Coldwater, you would have turned right or left?
Well, I don't remember which way I went. I guess you could either go right or left. You could go left. I guess you would go right then if you wanted to go to Coldwater.
Well, did you turn right or left? Did you go right towards Coldwater or left towards Century City?
I don't remember.
Okay, so is it your best recollection here today that you went to the movie theater first?
Yes, I think I went to the movie theater first. I'm pretty sure of that.
And you were driving, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And when you went to the movie theater, did you park in some sort of parking space or did you just pull up front? How did that occur?
No, we pulled to the side of the complex and parked at the meters.
Did you both get out of the car?
Yes.
Did someone pay the meter?
No.
Okay. And you went from the car up to the box office, correct?
Right.
Did you have to wait in line?
One or two people. Yes.
Okay. And about what time was it when you got to the movie theater?
I don't know. It was at the very end of that movie, I believe.
Which movie?
The one that we were supposed to see and we had asked the lady if we could get tickets for.
But were you supposed to see License to Kill or Batman?
Batman.
All right. So you went to get tickets for Batman. Is that correct?
No, we asked her for tickets to License to Kill for the showing that was at the same time that Batman was. And she said that it was sold out. So then I asked for the tickets to Batman, and she said the movie was already too far. It was like at the end of the movie, and she said she couldn't sell tickets after like 20 minutes. So we weren't going to be able to get tickets for that. Then I said, well, just give me tickets to Batman anyway for the next showing. So I got the tickets to the next showing, but they had the times. So I just gave them to my brother and he threw them away.
What time did you kill your parents?
I don't know.
So you wanted to go see Batman, but you asked for tickets to License to Kill because at that time you already knew that the police might find Carrie Parker and he could tell them that you hadn't shown up. Is that why you asked for tickets to License to Kill?
I believe that's why, yes.
Okay, when did you think that all out?
On the way there?
Okay, so first you decided to pick up the shells because of the fingerprints. Then you decided to ask for tickets to License to Kill so that you could keep the police away from Carrie Parker, correct?
Well, that wasn't my main concern. My main concern was that, we would go and we would have tickets to give to the police. So when we said we were at the movie, we would show them tickets, and hopefully that would be, they wouldn't ask anymore and Carrie would not come into the picture. But in the event that they did find Carrie, I was thinking that I should not get the tickets to Batman and get the tickets to License to Kill so that I could at least tell Carrie that I had been to License to Kill, and I was hoping to tell the police that I'd been to License to Kill and show them the tickets. But when it was sold out, I couldn't get tickets. I asked for tickets to Batman for the 8 o'clock showing, hoping she would just give me those. And then she told me she couldn't give me those.
Had you already seen License to Kill?
Yes.
So you've seen both those movies before you killed your parents.
Right.
And when you saw, how long before August the 20th had you seen License to Kill?
I believe the weekend before.
And how long before had you seen Batman?
Longer before that, I believe.
More than a week before.
Yeah, I think so.
Now, you didn't go to the theater to ask for tickets to License to Kill just so the police would know that you'd been there, right? You did it for another reason.
No, I did it so the police would know that I'd been there and I could give them tickets.
And also because you needed the police to know that you'd actually been there and not looked it up in the newspaper, right? Because
exactly.
You couldn't know from looking at the newspaper that License to Kill was going to be sold out that night.
Right.
Because it doesn't say movie at 8 will be sold out tonight in the newspaper.
Right, exactly.
So you had to go to the theater in order to establish that you had actually been there and found out that License to Kill was sold out.
Right.
And that would confirm to the police that you'd been to the theater and hadn't just cooked this up by reading the paper, right?
Well, not exactly. I mean, that's basically right. I mean, I figured that they would ask for tickets. So we tried to go over there and get tickets. And when that didn't work out, the next best thing, the only thing we could tell them is that License to Kill had been sold out, and hoping that they would confirm that we had been there. But I wanted to have the tickets because the tickets would be able to show that we had been at the movie when my parents died. So I was trying to quickly create this alibi that I was at the movies. But since I couldn't get tickets, the next best thing I could do was at least show that we had been to theater at some point by saying that License to Kill was sold out, which was not a great idea because I knew then I'd have a problem with Carrie if they found Carrie. But at that point, we were just sort of scrambling. That was the best I could do.
How long did it take for you to park the car, go to the box office, have this transaction, and get back in the car?
Well, we ran to the box office and ran back. So maybe under 10 minutes, if that.
Then where did you go?
Well, my brother thinks we went then to go drop off the guns.
Okay, so you went from Century City back up north towards Mulholland, is that correct?
Right.
And you were driving, is that correct?
Yes.
And when you parked the car to go into the theater, did you park it just right there on the street?
At the meters if you're facing at the right side.
Okay. So you didn't have to walk very far to go from where you park your car to where the box office was, is that correct?
Well, we ran and we didn't have to run very far because we ran up the middle. It was like a middle walkway that led around to the middle of the complex.
So you spent no more than 10 minutes going from the car to the box office and back to the car, and then you left and went up towards Mulholland, correct?
Right.
And you were still driving?
Yes.
Okay, what route did you take to go from Century City up towards Mulholland?
Well, I'm really not sure because I'm not sure which one I went first. And if I knew the streets I was taking, I'd be able to figure out better where I had gone first. That's one of the reasons I can't figure it out. But I'm sure I went back on Santa Monica and I just cut through the flats of Beverly Hills and went through the lights and probably went up Rexford to Coldwater.
Okay, so you do have a specific recollection of going up Rexford to Coldwater, is that correct?
No, that's the only street that I can think of by name right now because my dad almost bought a house that was on the corner of Rexford and Sunset. But I could have taken Rodale Drive, I think goes all the way through, or whatever the road is in front of the Beverly Hills Hotel. All those streets lead up to eventually Coldwater. So I took one of them.
And you went towards Coldwater, and you took Coldwater all the way up to Mulholland, correct?
Right.
When you got to Mulholland, which way did you turn, right or left?
Left.
And how far did you travel on Mulholland Drive before you stopped?
Not very far. Just till I got to a point where I felt I could pull over. There was enough room and I could pull over. And there looked like there was a drop off where we could drop the guns off there.
When you stopped and your brother dropped off the guns, did he drop off the guns on the side that you had been traveling on, or did he go across Mulholland and drop them off on the other side?
He dropped them off on the same side that I pulled over. And then I turned around. And when I came back, he was standing there.
And he got back in the car with you?
Right.
How long was he out of the car?
Maybe 2 minutes.
How long did it take you to get up there? Once you left the flats of Beverly Hills and went up to this area, how long did it take you?
That would take about probably 10 minutes, maybe just under, I guess.
When your brother got back in the car, did he say anything to you about what he had done?
He may have. I don't remember. I'm sure he probably did say where he put them, but
Before you dropped him off with the guns, did you have any discussion with him as to how he should hide the guns?
no.
Okay, did you say just hide them, or what? There was no conversation, or how did that happen?
Well, there was no specific conversation or any advice I gave him that I can remember. I mean, I guess I may have told him, try to hide them well or something. I don't know. I really can't remember that.
What did you do with the shotgun shells?
Well, those I remember we still had at the gas station because I remember putting them in the dumpster with the clothes. So we hadn't, pretty sure he didn't take any of them down the ravine, but he may have taken some. I don't know.
And why was it that you decided to hide the guns?
So the police wouldn't find them.
So you could get away with it, right?
So they wouldn't know that we were involved at that point, yes.
Now then, after you left Mulholland, where did you go?
Well, we either went to the theater, but if we already went to the theater, then we went to the Taste of LA where Perry was supposed to be.
And were you driving at that time?
Yes.
And when you got to the Taste of LA, did you find a parking space right away, or did you have to look for one? And how did that occur?
I remember that we were driving around a little bit lost, trying to find our way. I couldn't find the entrance. I was lost in some way. I can't remember the streets I took, but I remember being confused and eventually finding it. And then there was like a parking area where all the cars were and a gate and a guard or whatever at the gate who was basically telling me that it was closing up and they were closing and they weren't letting people in anymore. And I just said that I had a friend in there and I wanted to find him. And at that point, my brother was waiting in the car.
How long were you lost before you found the entrance?
It was not really lost as much as just sort of confused as to the entrance. I don't know, maybe a few minutes.
Now, you said you went to a gas station. When was it during your journeys that you went to the gas station?
On the way to the Taste of LA.
Where was the gas station?
Somewhere along the way. I'm not really sure exactly.
Well, could you describe this gas station for me, please?
Very vague recollection, but I remember the big dumpsters against the wall and some building and then the pumps. And you just sort of drive in. And I remember parking the car in front of the dumpsters and had the doors open. And we were searching the car and he was changing his clothes. And there was a little building there. where there was like, restrooms and so on. And that's all I remember.
Was the gas station open or closed?
It was open.
There were people there?
I believe so, yes.
When your brother did you change your clothes too?
I don't really remember. I think I changed my shoes or something. I didn't change my pants.
Why did you change your shoes?
So I think there was blood on my shoes.
Whose shoes did you put on?
My brother's.
Do you wear the same size?
Yes.
So the gas station was open and you were changing your clothes. Were there people that you could see while you were doing this?
I don't remember. I do remember that it was lighted where the pumps were, and there was some light where I was, but it was not very good light, and I had trouble searching the car because it wasn't so lighted. But we didn't talk to anybody or anything. We just left.
How long were you at the gas station doing these things?
We rushed through that, and but I still think it probably took about under 5 minutes, but several minutes for sure.
I think what she's trying to get at here is that there were a lot of decisions that were being made along the way, and that there's a certain level of meticulousness that they must have had with all of these decisions. Basically, to poke holes in the idea that they, just were kind of making these haphazard decisions. It's not it's not convincing me. It's not playing well with me. It might play well with others. But it's kind of what she's doing. To me, it's just boring me. That's my very, very honest take. It just seems, it feels like just too many details. It doesn't seem to move the needle in either direction very much, other than giving opportunity for the witness to talk about, how these decisions were just sort of flying from here and there, and they were haphazard, and some of them made sense and some of them didn't, which doesn't help the prosecution. It helps the defense.
How long did it take you to get from the gas station to the Taste of LA?
I don't remember, but that whole trip to get to the Taste of LA was probably like 15 to 20 minutes.
When you got to the Taste of LA, you talked to the man at the guard gate, and he told you couldn't come in, and you convinced him to let you in. Is that correct?
Yes.
Then you went and parked?
No, I was already parked. My brother was in the car, and I walked up to go in, and that's when he said it was closing. And
all right, so it wasn't a gate to the parking lot, it was a gate to the event, correct? And so your brother was waiting in the car.
Yes.
Was he in a normal parking space, or was he up against a curb?
No, we were, I believe, in a normal parking space. There were people still leaving. I just have a recollection of seeing him in the car as I left.
And during this
close,
period, I'm sorry.
Close to the gate.
Okay. Then you went inside, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you look for Perry?
Yes.
How long did you look for Perry?
Didn't take more than a couple minutes to realize there was basically nobody there. All the booths were closing down. Just circled around the booths. And then I asked, I guess at that point, I believe my brother came in also.
Did he
I
help
don't
you?
remember that so well, but I do remember asking to use a phone inside.
Did you use a phone inside?
Yes.
And is that the phone that you used to call Perry, and those numbers are reflected on the exhibit I showed you earlier?
Right.
Now, you had a phone call with him at 11:07 that lasted for 6 minutes, correct?
Okay.
What did you say to Perry during that time?
That I had missed him, and that he obviously he wasn't there. He said that he had waited for me, and that he had to leave, and he was going to sleep. He had to work the next day, and I told him, no, I really need to talk to him. We haven't talked in a while, I believe. I hadn't met with him in a while, and that I really need to talk to him, and could we meet tonight? And it's about all I remember the conversation, except for him agreeing that we could meet at the Cheesecake Factory in Beverly Hills, and he was willing to meet us there.
Kel Marie, I completely agree with you. none of this reads as meticulous or calculated to me. It sounds like two people in shock scrambling to cover their tracks after the fact. It feels like this hurts her way more than it helps. I completely agree. Completely agree. It looks, yeah, scrambling is a good way to describe it, because it does look like they're just sort of like, all right, what can we come up with? What can we come up with? You know, like let's try to go here, we'll try to go there, we'll try to do this, we'll try to do that, we'll try to catch a movie. Oh no, that movie is they're not selling enough tickets for it. Okay, well let's try the next one, and then you know, we can say that it was sold out. Let's try and meet so and so over there. Oh no, the food festival is closing. It's like they're just trying to think on the fly and not doing the best job of it. Meanwhile, if they had premeditated the movie tickets, they could have bought the movie tickets earlier that day, like that morning. Erik was out all day, right? He could have gone to the movie theater and bought tickets ahead of time to Batman for that time period, for, you know, to say, well, here we were at the movie theater. Yeah, I completely agree. Spending this much time on this is not good for the prosecution, in my opinion.
And that's all I remember.
Then there was a second phone call. The first phone call was at 11:07 and lasted 6 minutes. That takes us to 11:13. There was a second phone call to Perry Berman from the same location at 11:15, and that was from you.
Right.
Why did you call him back?
I think I know why, but I'd be guessing because I really don't remember the second call so well.
In the second call, you asked, didn't you ask him to go back to the house with you?
Yes, I believe so.
Why did you want Perry to go back to the house with you?
Because I was just concerned that we were not going to be able to make it through an evening with him after all this had happened. And I just wasn't sure. I thought to myself, why did I? I'm pretty sure that this is what I was thinking, but I really don't have a great recollection. It like comes and goes. But I essentially believe that I was sort of just saying to myself, why didn't I just meet him at the house? And so I believe that's why I called him back.
Because you wanted him to meet you at the house and not at the Cheesecake Factory.
Right, and then I wouldn't have to go through the evening with him and be concerned about getting through the evening.
It wasn't that you wanted him to be with you when you discovered your parents. That wasn't the reason you wanted him to meet you at the house?
Yeah, that's the reason.
You wanted him to witness you discovering them and to see your surprise, right?
No, I wanted him to be with me because I didn't want to find them alone. And I really didn't want to have to call 911 myself.
Because you knew that you would have to act like you had just found your parents when in fact that wasn't true, right?
No, it was mostly just my feeling that I would like to have him with me.
You wanted your good friend Perry to come into the house with you and see what you had done in that room?
I just remember what I was thinking, which was that I felt very, I thought it would be comforting. My brother wasn't comforting. I was feeling that the whole thing was feeling very crazed with the dropping off of the guns and the whole thing with the movie theater. And I just felt like while I was there and I had missed him, I could have just gone back. But I wanted to make an attempt to have Perry come with me.
And in order to lure Perry back to the house, you told him that you needed to go there to get a false ID for your brother, correct?
The word lure, to lure him back to the house as if he's like setting up some sort of a trap for Perry Berman. Like, that's just, if you're not already on board with the prosecution, that kind of a word is going to be grating.
I believe I told him that, yes.
Okay, and what false ID was it that your brother was going to go get, Mr. Menendez?
I didn't have anything in particular. I was thinking it was just an excuse.
Was it Donovan's false identification?
That was the false ID that he had.
Did he have another false identification from your cousin, Timmy Anderson, to your knowledge?
No.
Your Honor, I have on the board an exhibit which has not yet been marked. I think it's 248 is the next in order. 249, I'm sorry. May that be so marked?
249.
Thank you. May I approach, please?
Yes.
Mr. Menendez, I'm showing you exhibit, which is 249, which is a compilation of Thomas Guide pages. Do you recognize that in this, can you see this? It says Westwood here, it says Beverly Hills, and it's got several times it says Los Angeles. Do you see this map? Okay. At the time that you killed your parents, they were living at North Elm in Beverly Hills, which was the 700 block, correct?
Right.
And you see up here, it says Elm 700. Can you see that? For the record, Your Honor, I'm going to mark that with a red dot. In addition, on this map, at Santa Monica Boulevard and Century Park. Now, the Century 14 theaters that you're talking about, were they on Century Park? Near the Schubert Theater here? Is it the same complex with the Schubert Theater?
I believe so. It's the Century City mall there.
Okay,
The same mall that,
was it in the shopping mall?
Yeah.
All right, Your Honor, I'm going to mark the shopping mall here with a red dot as well. Now, also on this map, the Santa Monica Civic is right down here. It's on Main Street at Pico. It says Civic Auditorium. Is that where the Taste of LA was? The Civic Auditorium.
I believe so.
I'm going to mark that with a red dot as well, Your Honor. And in this map, at the very top, you can see Coldwater Canyon, and it goes off the top of the map, 249, and then you can see Mulholland Drive here. It appears that off the map they intersect. Is this about the area where you turn left onto Mulholland?
Yes,
And I'm going to mark that top with a dot as well. Now then, Mr. Menendez, it's your testimony that you went from the home at Elm Drive and you either went to Century Theater or you went up and got rid of the guns first.
Right. I think we went to the theater.
Okay, so you went to the theater, you went from Elm Drive, you went down, did you take Santa Monica Boulevard to the mall, to the Century City Mall?
Right. We came somewhere across. I don't think. Yeah.
And then down and you went
Right.
there.
Yeah.
Then you went back towards the Elm Drive house, is that correct, to get up towards Coldwater?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay, and then you went up Coldwater and you went all the way up to Mulholland, turned left, stopped for a couple of minutes, correct?
Right.
Then went back down Coldwater. Is that
Yes.
correct?
That's right.
When you went back down Coldwater, did you go back towards your family's home or did you take another route to deviate off to the west?
I don't remember. My brother was giving me the directions because I really didn't know the way too well.
Did you take main streets? Did you take streets that had 2 lanes in each direction or were you taking streets that had 1 lane in each direction?
I believe it was main streets.
All right, and then you went back down towards this area and you went to a gas station. Now, was that gas station on a major street,
I think so.
like Santa Monica Boulevard
I
perhaps?
believe so.
Or Wilshire or Pico?
It's on one of the main streets.
Okay, and that was one of the streets that led out towards Santa Monica, correct?
Right.
Okay, and you went to the gas station and you stopped there for no more than 5 minutes, correct?
Right.
And then from the gas station, you went down to the Civic Auditorium, parked the car, went inside, looked for Perry Berman, is that correct?
Right.
When you saw that he wasn't there, you made your first phone call to him at 11:07, correct?
Right.
Now, did you hear the testimony of Mrs. Averill Crone? She heard the noises around 10:10 p.m.
I've heard her testimony, but I don't really remember what she said.
Right.
I guess she said that.
And then your attorneys called witnesses that indicated that the shots were at 10 p.m. Do you remember the testimony of Mrs. Lord,
Yes.
the woman with the hearing aids?
Right.
Okay. How did you, if the murders occurred at 10, if the killings,
I'm going to object to the use of the word murders.
All right, she had correct.
Good
if
objection.
the killings occurred at 10 and the phone call to Perry Berman was at 11:07,
Right.
how did you do all of that in 67 minutes?
Driving
Well, I haven't added it up,
maniac a little bit.
but it would be under 67 minutes.
And you're absolutely sure that those distances were covered in 67 minutes, is that correct?
Yes.
Were you speeding in the car?
Okay, I could say that it's possible. It's possible. If it's at 10 to 11 o'clock at night on a weekend night, traffic is not the same as it is on a weekday slash any daytime. Um, and this is all happening on the west side of LA. So like, yes, there's still traffic, but like going from Beverly Hills to Santa Monica, Century City, these are areas that are right next to each other. Yes, they're crowded. Yes, there's traffic. Yes, there's cars. But at that time of night, you could totally hit all of those spots in 67 minutes, I think. I personally think that's entirely possible. Having driven around these areas myself at like during the day and at this time of night, I think it's entirely possible.
Not particularly. I did not want to get a ticket, obviously, but I was driving fast, and I was having some problems driving, so I don't remember how fast I was going. But I wasn't, racing.
How was the
way
traffic?
over the speed limit.
How was the traffic that night?
There was no traffic.
And it's your testimony that you accomplished all of these tasks in 67 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's possible. Not just the driving, but also stopping with all of these things. I mean, let's not forget the documentary called Clueless, where Cher's father says anywhere in Los Angeles takes 20 minutes to get to. That's obviously not true. And obviously I'm 100% kidding. It's a movie, not a documentary. But I always think of that whenever I'm driving around LA. I'm like, everywhere in Los Angeles takes 20 minutes to get to. But when we're talking about the west side of LA, at this time of night, yeah, I can totally see that that taking a shorter amount of time, and especially because he said that they ran to the ticket booth. It was a quick interaction, like 5 minutes, boom, back in the car. Then they were, back at the Taste of LA. The tents were already closing everything down, so they kind of did a lap and then got out of there really quickly. I can see all of this happening in 67 minutes.
Your Honor, I'm going to go on to another topic. So can we break? I'm not going to finish today.
Let me see you at the sidebar as far as scheduling.
Yes.
Okay. So
Decision that we want you back here tomorrow at 9:00.
So there you go. That's going to be the end of it for the testimony. And I know Debbie Faison Cook. I know. Same. Every time she says Santa Monica Boulevard, my brain just went Santa Monica Boulevard. Yeah, 100%. Okay, let's get some questions here that I collected. I totally should have answered these earlier. I apologize. But let's go through them real quick, and then we'll wrap it up for today. Debbie Faison Cook says you have to prove it was irrational, right? Or you don't have to prove it was irrational. It's imperfect self-defense, correct? Yes. For imperfect self-defense, it is a sincere but unreasonable belief that your life was in danger. So irrational is unreasonable. You just have to believe that they believed it, right? So it's not something that I would do in the situation, not something that I have to say that is reasonable to me, but that they that you have to believe that they believed it. Draco Amy says, question, does a threat have to be specifically stated, or can it just be implied contextually? Context absolutely can get you there. It just, what is the communication? How reasonable is that explanation of that communication? Makes sense. Love Dreaming Peach, this question, is it regular lawyering for the lawyer to act like they don't believe anything the witness says? Oh, I think I already answered this one. Yeah, it's fairly common. It's fairly common. There's different styles, of course, but it's fairly common. Debbie Faison Cook, so do lawyers read the room? Like if they come in hot and then feel that the jury didn't like it, would they back off a little bit? Different lawyers are humans, right? And humans have different capabilities of reading the room. Some are very good at it, some are not so good at it. But ideally, yes. Ideally, you would want to do that. That if you feel like your tactic is not being taken very well, that maybe you sort of just very gently maneuver and shift gears. Just a Girl Baking says, question, were they able to pull gunpowder residue off their hands back then like they can now? Yes, they were able to do that. They had the capability of doing that. They didn't do it in this case because the cops really bungled the investigation. They didn't check they even had shells in their car. I think he testified earlier. Lyle said that in a previous episode. Yeah, that's just bad investigation. Love Dreaming Peach says, question, did either brother ever say that they regretted doing it? I don't know that I've heard anyone explicitly say that, but there has been an indication of some measure of regret. I think because Lyle said that, he was like, our lives have been an absolute disaster ever since then. Jenny Harris' question, why was Erik allowed to listen to Lyle's testimony when he could just repeat what he said? Because Erik is also a defendant in this case. So the rule, well, first off, I mean, they didn't even have like the rule in this case. Like, witnesses were allowed to watch the testimony. They were allowed to watch the trial on TV. Like, they were allowed to do that in this case, which to me is just absolutely wild. But even if they weren't allowed to, it's different for Erik and Lyle because they are defendants in the case. So they are allowed to, they have a right to face their accusers. They have a right to face, the witnesses that are testifying. So they are allowed to watch all of the witnesses testify, and that includes the other defendant. So that's why. Debbie Faison Cook, is she being obtuse on purpose? It seems like it. Christian Williams says, are there some trials over here in America that are only heard before a judge? Yes, you have a right to a trial by a jury, but you don't have a requirement to have a jury at your trial if you are involved in a lawsuit. So civil or criminal. Usually it's smaller cases. Much smaller cases, like it might be like a 2 or 3 day trial or something like that. And there are some reasons why you might not want a jury on a case. But yeah, so it does happen. Dater says, what could Lyle do that would help her and be of disservice to himself? Indirect. How is he helping himself and giving her a hard time? I mean, he is pushing back a little bit when she's characterizing things in a certain way, or if she's asking things in a confusing way. He's asking for clarification. That's very helpful for himself. He's also maintaining his composure. He's maintaining consistent body language and tone of voice. That's very helpful for himself. He could decide to fight her on every single point, and that would get tedious. See, that's all I can think of off the top of my head. Christina M, were these the same prosecutors for the second trial? I believe they are not. I'm not fully certain because I've been trying to take this case as it's been coming. So I've been trying to limit the research that I do on this, even though it's very, very tempting. But I think it was new prosecutors on the second trial. And also a question from Jan. Do you prefer bench or jury trials? Hot bench. Sorry for being late. Been in bed sick with a vid. I'm so sorry to hear that. I hope that you are hopefully going to be feeling better sooner rather than later. I like a good jury trial. I mean, but as a lawyer though, for any particular case, I would, it depends on the case. It depends on the case. It depends on, the facts and circumstances, whether or not it's good to have a jury of someone's peers deciding a case. Sometimes, for example, bias, unrelatability, things like that are issues for a particular case. Or sometimes you just, you don't want to have to worry about explaining certain concepts to a jury, depending on the area of law, et cetera, et cetera. So, okay. let's see if I am trying to upload something real quick. I wasn't sure if it was going to automatically populate. I meant to upload this earlier because this is wonderful. Draco, Amy, I see your question. I did get your email, and let's see here. Let me take this off the screen. So Draco, Amy, one of my wonderful mods, which by the way, shout out to the mods as always. You guys are wonderful in helping to manage discussion and channel it in a good way when people are agreeing and disagreeing, and keeping that all respectful as I love. Anyway, so Draco Amy sent me a swoop. She made a swoop for me, which I absolutely love, and I think this is a perfect moment to test it out to see if it works. Let's see here. Okay. I love it. I absolutely love it. Let's do it again. You know what I love about it especially is the fact that Holmes absolutely serves the assist for Indy in our home. Holmes like serving Indy the muffin so that she can eat one is basically what happens in real life. Sometimes we will find something, a package that has been torn to shreds and is completely empty because Mr. Bites left it on the countertop. And even though it's out of Indy's reach where he left it, maybe it was put into reach by a certain little tuxedo cat named Holmes. It has happened before. I love it. Let's do it again. Let's do it one more time. This is so cute. So cute. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. I absolutely love it. That is super cute. And we will totally be adding that to the swoops. And I've been meaning to make one. So I love the fact that I now have my first swoop. I love it. Okay, guys. So that for me about does it for today. Thank you so much for joining me on this one. This was the 7th installment of Lyle's testimony. I mean, we have been in Lyle land for, it sounds like La La Land, Lyle land for so many weeks now. But it sounds like we've got maybe a little bit more cross-examination by the prosecution. We'll see. We will see. But definitely at least a little bit more for next week. So we will be back with Lyle on the stand next week on Monday. On Friday, we've got another members only live stream coming up. So for those of you that are members, I will see you on Friday. And also keep an eye out for your notifications because I am about to publish another pre-recorded video. This one is going to be on Russell Brand and why people have lost their minds over the subject. So if you guys wouldn't mind, I would love it if you guys would watch that as it comes out. It's going to be a little bit of a longish one. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. Okay. Alrighty. I think that for me about does it. All right. Okay. Thank you guys. And thank you for everything. And I will see you guys